You are on, sir.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Special Finance Committee budget hearing of July 21st, 2020 at approximately 1 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
You sure can. Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes, I'm here.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Here.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Present.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Here.
and Counselor Ramon Tiger Abeta.
Here. Okay, we have approval of the agenda. Yesterday we ended at Public Works, so I'd like to pick up there with the Transit Division and then Administration. Then we will go to Public Utilities, and then after Public Utilities, start with the scheduled department for today, which is Community Development, which includes Economic Development, Planning and Land Use, Affordable Housing, Arts and Culture. But before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I do want to take the opportunity to introduce a couple of resolutions for the mayor. The first being a resolution creating a community health and safety task force. Councilwoman Villarreal is a co-sponsor. Then I'd like to introduce an ordinance creating efficiencies, enhancing effectiveness, and eliminating silos by reorganizing certain city departments. I'd like to introduce a resolution adopting the City of Santa Fe fiscal year ending 2021 operating budget and organizational chart. And then Councilwoman Villarreal is sponsoring a resolution changing the start time of afternoon sessions of governing body meetings to 4 p.m. and evening sessions of the governing body meetings to 6 p.m., beginning with the August 12th, 2020 meeting and continuing through the December 9th, 2020 governing body meeting. So with those being introduced, they can then be scheduled for the relevant committees. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Can I have a roll call?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez, Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Ramon Tiger Abeta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back into our Public Works Department, and we are on the Transit Division. And I assume Mr. Romero is going to present, or who's going to present Transit, Mary?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask the department staff to continue with their presentation. Is Mr. Romero on the call today?
Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you. I'm trying, maybe someone can help me with the PrimeGov meeting viewer. I'm not able to pull up yesterday's meeting agenda. Is anybody else having problems with that?
So Counselor, Mr. Chair, I went back to the email that was sent to us. If you open that email, it's probably the easiest way to find it. That's what I did.
The email
From Mary McCoy that came yesterday or the day before that
Okay.
had the attachment in it. And what I did is I saved it to iBooks so that I can go back to it. I'm sure there's a way in PrimeGov, but I don't know how to do it.
Okay, I'm not sure who's on to address this, but could we have someone look at that for the future, that we need to be able to go back for, you know, some amount of time to look at meetings, because Counselor Romero Worth is much more technologically sophisticated than I am. And she has youngish children that can help her. So I'll try to find that email, but
I'll send it to you.
thank you. I appreciate it. That's problematic for us in terms of technology. Thank you, Chair.
Counselor Lindell, this is
Yes.
Carolyn.
Yes,
How I'm finding it on Prime Gov is if you go into the meeting viewer and it'll
Yes.
list the meetings,
Yes.
like today's meeting, and if you scroll down, it lists previous meetings.
oh, I see it. I didn't go far enough. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, is there someone from Public Works that can present the transit budget to us?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. This is Tomas Martinez. Good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
So our transit division, our mission is to provide transit service to the residents and visitors wherever life takes them using low carbon multimodal transportation, which we're primarily CNG, which is compressed natural gas.
Okay, and Mr. Martinez, when I look at your budget, we've got 540, which is your transit bus system. You've got salaries, wages, and benefits. There doesn't look like there's much of a change at all. There is a change in contractual and utilities, and then also capital outlay. Can you explain contractuals and utilities? There's looks like a 62% decrease. What is it that we're gonna be losing as a part of this reduction?
Yeah, we have the new CNG facility that is slated to run a lot more efficient than the old one. That was something that we completed this year. And that's gonna assist us in it. And also we have the south side, which we had been paying utilities on. And that's gonna be a reduction.
Okay, so you think you feel comfortable with the 62% reduction?
Yes, yes. We also have some contracts for different services that we were using that we were able to thin out. And so we cut there. We also froze 10 positions.
Okay. Okay.
Chair?
Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal.
On that point, Mr. Martinez, can you explain further what you mean by reduced for the Southside CNG facility? What specifically do you mean by that?
No, the south side facility and the CNG facility are two separate facilities. We built a $4.5 million natural gas pumping station that currently it fuels us, it fuels environmental services, and also serves for the public.
Are you specifically talking about the south side? You said pumping facility?
Yeah, no, that's here at our transit property. The south side facility is the transit center,
Right.
and
That's
we
what I
had
wanted to
slated for it to be open. Last year, it wasn't. This year, we're about to go out to bid on it, but it still won't be open till after the beginning of the year if all goes well. So we didn't need to budget any money for any major money for utilities.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions from the committee regarding transit's budget?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a clarity on with the adjustments you said and positions that were frozen. Do you foresee any effects on access to services?
We currently did some rejigging of some of our routes, and we're using them as an on-demand type route instead of running buses consistent. And our goal is to serve the people a little bit better. Instead of us actually running a Route 1, which would only go from one spot to one spot. If a rider needs to get on the one and they need to go to the hospital, we actually pick them up at a bus stop, and we will take them and drop them off at the bus stop at the hospital.
Thank you. And to add to that, when you said routes were adjusted and it's on demand, how do folks let you know that they're in need of transportation? And the example you just gave, does that mean you use a smaller paratransit vehicle, or you use our larger buses for that?
Yes, at the moment, we're using the smaller, not the paratransit, but our Santa Fe pickup vehicles. But there are times where we'll have bigger groups where we'll dispatch a bus. And there's signs at every stop. The customer has to physically be at the bus stop, and they call us and let us know that they need a ride, and we ask for their name, where they're being picked up, and where they're going. And then we'll give them an approximate time that we'll be there.
Thank you for that. And so the routes that were adjusted, there's some that will continue based on.
Yes,
that-
our heavy ridership routes, we couldn't run that way.
Excellent.
This is just for like the 1, the 5, the 6, the M. Those routes have very, very low ridership, typically 20 to 30 people a day with a bump every now and then. So it wasn't cost effective to really have a bus driving back and forth. So it's saving us on maintenance, it's saving us on manpower, and hopefully it's more efficient all the ways around.
Thank you for that clarity.
And it also allowed us to offer bus service to St. Vincent's on Sundays, which was something that we never had before. And I used to get a lot of requests for that.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? I saw Councilwoman Vihil Coppler is joined us. Did you have any questions, Councilwoman Vihil Coppler?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, then let's go ahead and move to the administration of Public Works. And as far as the administration, I don't see any real big changes, but I don't know, is it, Ms. Wheeler, are you gonna answer questions regarding the administration's budget, or is Mr. Romero?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm available to answer questions, and Mr. Romero's on as well. I think if we go to the next slide, Mary, I think we can see that the biggest change in the administration came from a transfer out, that rail yard properties transfer out. So that's what made the 19% change. And I believe that's some of the money that's being taken from the cash reserve at rail yard and used to fund the city. And maybe Mary could provide more detail on that.
Mr. Chair, councilors, there is the $972,000 transfer out from Fund 515 that I'm going to ask Andy Hopkins to explain. It's the Rail Yard Properties Fund. So that brings the total change with the addition of that amount. That brings the total change for this fund up 37% or 761. So Andy, do you want to explain to the committee the transfer out for the Fund 515?
Yes, that is the transfer to cover debt service on the rail yard property. It is coming from the Rail Yard Properties Fund into the debt service fund.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal, you have your hand up.
Just a quick question. For this section, how many people does this consist of when we look at the admin budget in terms of salaries and wages?
I think Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, I'll try to answer that. I think it's at least half of my salary as the Director of Public Works. And Emily Pasula was we're the only two people in admin at Public Works. And transit actually funds part of those two salaries. So it's some portion of Emily's and mine that's left in this fund.
Andy, you see the line above rail yard properties transfer out, it's debt service. That's one of those weird ones that it's actually funded out of 515. It's not transferred out to the debt service fund.
I think Brad is providing us with a clarification on 515. But in order to answer the question, I'm pulling up the sheet now. And yes, Regina Willer's salary is funded out of admin. And that would be the general fund that you see there.
So all of it or half of it?
The full amount.
Okay, and that includes benefits also, insurance, retirement, and
And then
Mr.
also-
Chair, yes, that is correct.
And Emily's position too?
I'm looking, Mr. Chair, looking that up right now.
Thank you.
Emily's position is the one that is funded out of the transit division.
Okay, thank you.
okay, any other questions from the committee? Okay, so given the discussion that we had yesterday with the Public Works budget, specifically as it relates to the MRC and the golf course and parks and the reorganization, I would ask the committee if we could have a motion to postpone Public Works so that we can move on to utilities. And then on Monday, we will have a discussion on Public Works and we'll focus specifically on the MRC and golf course and parks. So can I have a motion to postpone Public Works?
Move to postpone approval of the Public Works budget until further discussion on Parks, Rec, and MRC.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Just under further discussion, if the committee members and other counselors can get us emails between now and Monday with specific questions you might have. I kept notes from yesterday, and so I'll send Ms. McCoy my notes. That way we could make sure that we're focused on Monday and we get the answers to the questions that we have. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Can you send us what you've collected and then we can add to that?
Yes, absolutely. I'll do
Thank
that this evening. Can I have a roll call?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes,
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Roman Tiger Abeta.
Yes. Okay, so then our next item on the agenda is public utilities.
Mr. Chair, members of the Finance Committee, thank you for your time. I do have a couple of division directors who are in the attendees to kind of help with any details, but ultimately Public Utilities Department, again, is made up of environmental services, the wastewater, water division, utility billing, and administration. The Public Utilities Department was challenged to reduce budget by $13 million, which we were able to accomplish going across all 5 of those sections and divisions. A couple of highlights, again, that's about an 18% budget reduction, was a tremendous task, but staff was very diligent in working and creative on how we do that. One of the major talking points had to do with a $287,000 charge to the general fund. The Environmental Services Department oversees the staff and functionality of the graffiti removal team, but that team was funded through the general fund. Through this exercise, it was deemed feasible that Environmental Services would pick up the expense of that section and continue to provide that service. So the general fund was able to realize 100% savings, and Environmental Services will pick up that cost, that annual cost, and was able to absorb the cuts needed through other sections within that department and be able to leave that service as whole. And then in addition, the following other budget changes, if we're ready, would move on into Environmental Services as our first talking point, which was actually the biggest cut of that 13 million. So within the Environmental Services Department, they did realize about a $6.2 million budget reduction. Total was 6.5 million because they did pick up that 286,000 from the general fund. The fund 240, that is actually the Keep Santa Fe Beautiful, which is really funded through grants, and so is managed through that fund of 240 and not the Environmental Services Fund of 510. The Keep Santa Fe Beautiful is a very small, again, very small budget. It really just is driven by grants that comes in and how that money is pushed out. So if it pleases the committee, I would move right into the Environmental Services, which is the meat of the budget and the reduction.
Yes, go ahead. And then if we have questions, we'll ask when you finish that.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of principles going through, looking at how we realize those savings or put pins in project going forward. One, if you notice on the sheet, it talks about actual usage from FY18 and FY19, and then the base budget. So as we look at salaries and wages, the recommended budget is in line with our actual expenditures, either historically, like from 18 and 19, and does include picking up the salaries of the graffiti workers. But ultimately, we were able to realize about 139,000 in reduction, just matching it with actuals, and did balance that back to the POL. To me, you'll see this going through each of the divisions. Again, it's one way to look at it. We do balance it to the POL. We do have vacancies. Some of the vacancies which may be funded and some which may not be funded to get there. But historically, again, we see that even though as we bring in staff, we still see staff that turnover. And so that's why I like to use the historical information of actual expenditures and make sure we're in line with those. And I felt like we were able to do that with that recommendation of the 4.5 million. Contractual and utilities did see a significant reduction of 1.5 million. The recommendation is still a little above what we see trending actuals through the past 2 fiscal years, but definitely less than 20, mainly driven by tipping fees. That's a major expense in this contractual and utilities line item. We do work very closely with solid waste management and Randall Kippenbrock and his team. Currently, those tipping fees are being held flat. And so we did see that we pulled a reduction back where we had budgeted money anticipating that those would increase. And in addition, there was some major work that was done last year on some of the closed dump sites that was mandated through the Environmental Services Department that we were able to do through Integra, some groundwater monitoring and gas remediation that we were able to do that we're not anticipating that we would have to do this year. And those two were the major reductions that we were able to get the 1.5 million. Repairs and maintenance stayed relatively flat from last year. And again, it's a little bit above what we historically see, but a lot of this is driven by cart repair, repairs to the vehicles. They'll show up in both repair and maintenance and in operating cost. So that one did remain relatively flat for us. Supplies also remained relatively flat. And I do feel kind of it stays in line with, again, actuals that we see, maybe plus or minus maybe 50,000. We did see a slight reduction in insurance. Again, I think this is set by finance as they look at, I'll say majority of that is claims, either a truck that is maybe smashes a mailbox or scratches a car. So that is a projection, is trued up based on our percentage of what the city sees as liability and claims paid out. And other operating costs, we did see a place for a reduction here, about a little over $700,000. A lot of this reduction came as Tomas from Transit mentioned, or from Public Works mentioned about the new compressed natural gas station. Our larger trucks do run on CNG, compressed natural gas. And so we are anticipating seeing a savings from that, as well as there was a remodel that was done of the environmental services building that we saw in FY20 that is now complete, and they really have a nice facility with good flow and area for the staff there. So those are two major components that allowed us to see that reduction. The capital outlay is by far right about half of the reduction, and really what that is making a conscientious effort that we've put a pin and some of the large vehicle replacements. There's still about a $750,000 budget where we're replacing vehicles that have to be replaced, but did identify a couple that we want to put a pin in at this point as we continue to monitor the economy and how fast it rebounds, if that proves positive. So whether it's the whole thing that we would bring back before the governing body or just a portion, but right now just kind of putting a pin in those large purchases of those vehicles and moving forward with that. The last two then, I guess, are debt service that remain relatively flat and the transfer out. So that is environmental services, and I would like to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Oh, I didn't realize my hand was up, but just a quick question. So no staff changes?
There were really no staffing changes to this, other than that we will now be paying the salaries for, I think it's 3 or 4 employees that were paid from the general fund.
So you'll be paying for 4 employees, you said?
I believe that is correct. I believe there's 4 staff members that run the graffiti team.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just quickly go through some of the, what you said were the contractuals? The reductions and what we might expect to see from that?
Okay. On the contractual services, again, the landfill tipping fees, we reduced that amount by $1 million. So currently I would say that it costs us about $2.5 to $3 million in tipping fees for when we pick up the trash and we drop it off at the landfill or the recycling center. We were anticipating an increase in those tipping fees. We talked with Santa Fe Solid Waste Management. They said they're going to hold their fees for this current fiscal year. So we reduced that by $1 million, leaving about $2.5 million still that we would have to execute tipping fees. The other reduction was the Antera contract. They were on contract for about $500,000. Again, this was the work for the closed dump sites. The work that we did there, the remediation work that we did in FY20, that we're not anticipating having to do any more work up to this point. And we continue to work with NMED and doing our monitoring though, but no drilling of the wells or that additional gas collection and venting. The last was really, there was a contract for the new building. This was staff that came in that redid the workstation there, the offices and the break room and how we receive customers there. Those were the 3. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might have missed it, but Shannon, can you explain the general fund money? being subtracted out, I didn't really get that. When I
Okay.
look at the chart.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vio-Koppler, what I was pointing out was that environmental services oversees the daily function of a graffiti removal team. And we do cover some of their costs, vehicles, things like that, but their salaries really were still being paid from the general fund. And through this process, we thought it would be in the best intention of the whole budget balance is that we go ahead and pick up the salaries. The staff works for us, they report to us, so that we would cover their salaries. One of the main drives is as we looked at really reductions across the board, that is a very small budget and it is all salaries. And we felt by bringing them into environmental services, we could help. Like if they were needing to see an 18% cut in their budget, we could make that up somewhere else with larger budgets. So both helping the general fund and I think aligning staff with our structure. We do see them as part of our team and we do support them to be successful.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question, just for clarification. So I know that we have a fleet department that I believe is under finance. Is my understanding that environmental services has their own fleet maintenance department?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassette Sanchez, that is correct. Our fleet does not go to the city's fleet department. We have our own mechanics and bay, and I guess we really kind of consider like the large trucks are really kind of specialized, very time consuming, and the fact that we want to get those rolling, we like to keep priority. So we do bring that internal. So we do not pay portions to the city's fleet. We maintain our own fleet and manage our own contracts and mechanics on site to do those repair.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to wastewater management.
All right, the wastewater management team does consist of the what we call collections, not to be confused with bill collections, but these are the individuals that maintain the infrastructure in the city, the manholes, the pipelines, the lift stations, the treatment plant, which includes operations and maintenance. We have an engineering section for our CIP projects and for development review. We do have a certified lab, and that team that also oversees the industrial pretreatment, which is our education and oversight for industrial users. And I'm hoping I'm not missing a group. You'll have to forgive me if I did. So again, looking at wastewater as a whole, again, so the salaries, as you can see, are recommended really falls in line with more about actuals. Again, there are some vacancies, some are funded, some are unfunded. Again, looking at actuals where we trend over the last 2 years. While we do actively seek to fill those positions, we also still see attrition, people who retire or move on or promoted. So we're not anticipating a necessarily large group of that. And while the treatment facility staff is a 24-hour operations, we're confident with the 4.2 million that we would maintain kind of where we're at. We'd still aggressively look to fill positions, but kind of see that to kind of remain as a whole. Under contractual and utilities, that remained relatively flat. A lot of those costs are electrical costs that are tied up in that. Even though the facility has a solar array, that is also included in that utility cost, what we pay for that service. So again, in contractuals and utilities stayed relatively flat. We did see a slight uptick. Under the repair and maintenance, we do look at our actuals, and we did see a reduction in that. We're putting a pin in a couple of repair and maintenance issues, mainly because of finalizing the work on the digester, which is replacing some infrastructure, and going into the aeration upgrade. We're looking to realize some savings on not having to do some repairs on some of that equipment as we do major replacements under the CIP. And so we're able to gain about we're anticipating about $300,000 in savings because of that work. A slight reduction in supplies from last year, but again, putting it more in line with actuals over the last 2 years, and saw about $150,000 in savings there. Insurance is relatively flat, maybe a slight uptick of $90,000. Again, that is assessed based on prior years and the claims that come in from our risk department. Again, we do see a slight uptick in other operating costs. That did go up from last year and is significantly above what we have seen actual. But a lot of that, I believe, is a shift within the operation and projections for other costs that would fall into that would be things like safety supplies, chemical addition, maybe some other specific costs in the lab for an increased sampling. Capital outlay, we did see a reduction, mainly driven by what we putting a pin in the same as the vehicles. Our collection system does run rather large vehicles. A Vector truck runs about upwards of close to $400,000, where a rotor truck is about $110,000. We do try to alternate those every year, but what we'd like to do is put a pin in that, so we wouldn't be purchasing any large vehicles until we see, again, how we rebound, and we bring that back under a different request. We did see a reduction in debt service. I'm sure finance is on site. If there's a question on that, our debt service is going down. I think that we'll be retiring one of our bonds coming up in the next fiscal year. So realizing that savings, and then just a slight uptick in transfers out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Questions regarding wastewater management?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
So Shannon or Director Jones, can you go back to the point you were making? I think it was under contractual and utilities and the digester. I'm not sure I caught that. That's whatever you're quote unquote putting a pin in isn't gonna hurt the functionality of that, is it?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Marworth, no, it wouldn't. And actually that was under repairs and maintenance, where we realized about a $300,000 reduction. No, ultimately, so as we transfer to the new digesters have new boilers, for example, where the old digesters, we would be putting money into the old digesters to keep them running. Now, as we transition to the new ones, we should have a couple of years of realizing that savings to help us recover some of that capital cost. In addition, things like repair and maintenance of a roof over the Turblex building, which is our blower building. I know that they were talking about repairing that roof, and that has now been included in the CIP project. I think they're gonna actually remove portions of the roof to replace the blowers, and we'll pay the contractor to repair that roof as part of that project and not through the operating budget. So those are just a couple of examples. Nothing to do, we would still do repairs on the facility, the infrastructure that keeps that plant running, we would still do those repairs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, your hand is up. Did you have a question?
Nope, that's an old hand.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then let's go ahead and go to Water Management Division.
Right. The Water Division, very similar, right, has multiple sections, and each one of them is looked at individually, but the overview rolls up. This includes our source of supplies, both the Canyon Road facility and the Buckman Direct Diversion. They also have an engineering section, Water Resource Division, Conservation, that all make up that Water Division and work together as a team to make sure that we effectively manage our water sources and what we'd use today and how we look tomorrow. The Water Division was looking to reduce their budget by about 3.7 million. And so some ways that was accomplished was again some savings and salaries and benefits. Again, looking at our recommendation falling more in line with our actuals of FY19. Again, there's vacancies that we're working to fill, but we also realize that during the filling of those vacancies that I think will remain relatively steady. And so again, that one was just making it align with actuals. Very similar to contractual and utilities, making that align more with what we've actually seen in FY18 and 19, and we're able to realize about a $300,000 savings there in that alignment. Under the repair and maintenance, our recommended again falls in line more with actual some FY19, so seeing a reduction of about 400,000 of our budget, again making it align with actual costs. Supplies, so supplies remain relatively the same with where we were last year. It does run about $150,000 higher than actuals. A lot of those supplies, I would say, come from things like chemical addition. It really has to do with where we bring the water source from. This year, we did not get a significant amount of water through our Canyon Road facility. We did get some, right? But anticipating that if we needed to lean on that source of supply, we would see an uptick in chemical costs there. Insurance remained relatively the same for the water division. Other operating costs, we did see a reduction of about 1.4 million. In this operating cost, still stays about $1 million higher than what we're seeing as far as actuals, but we were able to see a $1.4 million reduction, of which I believe about $400,000 of that was realized through a reduction in the Buckman directive version, which was part of the conversation at the end of yesterday. And again, absolutely open to to continue to talk through that one on those other operating costs. The capital outlay, we saw a slight reduction, and again, that is mainly vehicles. I think we are moving forward with the recommendation for one vehicle replacement, but putting a pin in another one to kind of see how, again, how this looks as we trend out. Debt service stayed relatively the same. There was a slight reduction in debt service, and we did see a reduction in transfers out, but able to, again, to reduce budget by about $3.7 million. And I will stand for questions on that one.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jones, so can you elaborate? You said the other operating costs, there was a reduction of the 400,000, but what's the rest of it? It's about 1.4, right? So what
That
was
is, I'm just curious if Mr. Roach is on, if he would like to weigh in, because I think it goes across the 5 sections, each having kind of different ones. One thing that I would point out is I know there was a reduction in grounds and roadways. So they actually run 2 contracts that can fix street repairs. One is TLC, the other one is GM Emulsions, and a decision was made that we would just stay with the GM Emulsion contract, and if there is additional repairs that have to be done, right, that we could just look at that, amending that contract. That was about a $200,000 savings of that remaining 1 million. The bid contract for traffic control, there was about a $30,000 reduction on that one. But I will see if Jesse's available to chime in, and then I will look for some other big ticket items to share.
Shannon, this is Andy. I could maybe shed a little bit of light for you on the other operating costs. In the budget that Water submitted, there was a $1.2 million cut in the BDD source of supply item where where we pay BDD for the city's share. And that was, I know that was the initial request to BDD. I think the request ended up coming calling for a larger payment from the city than that, so that we may need to adjust that down the road. There was also a reduction in costs for internal services paid by water for fleet general fund services like payroll and HR, and for ITT based on, largely in cuts in fleet and IT that were passed along to department.
So that comes up to what you just mentioned, 1.4. That adds up to the 1.4 reduction.
I think those two, that's about 1.6, 1.9.
Yes, there were some other changes in there because, again, this includes not only those areas, but also things like printing and publishing and advertising and that. So that this is just the total change for all of those items.
Got it. Okay, and the other one was transfers out. What did you say was that change?
Well, the transfers out in the case of water is virtually all of that is the transfer to the Utilities Administration Fund to pay the costs of utilities admin and utility customer service. All three of the main utilities, water, wastewater, and ESD, pay those costs to run the utilities admin and customer service billing functions.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilwoman Tejada Coppler.
I do know that, I just want to say that Rick Carpenter and Mackie Romero are on board as panelists if they want to chime in anywhere here. But I would like to know, yesterday after the Buckman direct diversion presentation, we said we would wait for utilities, and since we're at the water portion, I'm wondering if this would be the time to discuss any further comments or questions that the committee or others may have regarding the Buckman budget as it relates to the water budget.
Does the committee have any questions regarding the water division and as it relates to Buckman, or what does the committee want to do with that?
Mr. Chair, do you want to have that conversation now?
Let's that's up to the committee. I mean, we could have it now, or I don't know if we're going to need more information. We've been reserving some things for Monday that were specific. I know Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez had some questions and concerns. I don't know if they were addressed yesterday or not, but it's up to the committee. What does the committee want to do?
I just wonder, the information that we were given yesterday was new. So we might need more time, and also I don't want to throw off our agenda today. We might want to postpone to Monday to give ourselves a little more space, but be curious what other counselors think.
Councilwoman Lindell, did you have a comment?
I agree with Councilor Romero Worth. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Yeah, I was about to say that, we just received those materials. So I agree with Councilor Romero Worth to postpone them and give us more time to review.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
I'm okay with postponing. I don't recall being emailed those materials unless that happened today.
I will make sure that was sent to you. I apologize if it wasn't.
Mr. Chair, I think they just came in like maybe around noon.
Okay, so Shannon, let's go to the administration then, and then we'll wrap up utilities.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I had one more question before we move off water.
Sure.
And it has to do, I just wanted to know if anyone knows what the balance is in the water division from collections.
Mr. Jones, do you have the answer to that?
So if I could just clarify, so when you talk about from collections, you're talking about like the amount receivable, like how much currently we're owed, like in the aging buckets? Is that the question?
I'm talking about from ratepayers.
Okay. So I do see Nancy as a participant. She should have that, any outstanding balance. If you don't mind, Chair, I will turn it over to her.
Okay, do you have the answer to that question? Mrs.
Yeah,
Mary?
I am getting my aging report right now. So I can give you totals. I obviously can break it up by division if you'd like to know that. I just don't have those broke down that small. But currently we run the aging the first day of every month. So this information is through June 30th of 2020. We currently have open 4,187,000. I'm going to just kind of round up. 31 to 60 days, we have $285 owing. From 61 to 90 days, we have 244,000 owing. And from 91 to larger, we have 2.2 million owing. And again, this is through June 30th. Just to give you sort of an example of where we were pre-COVID. So through February 29th of 2020, we only had 3.8 million owing current. We had 73,000 owing 31 to 60, which is about a $200,000, I guess you could say, reduction from where we are now. 17,000 from 61 to 90, which is a significant reduction, knowing that currently with COVID, we are owed 244,000. And the 91 to 100, well, excuse me, 91 to over, we were down to $1.9 million owed to the city. And now we are up to 2.2 million. So COVID has caused about $900,000 in three different categories, a significant reduction, I guess you could say, in collections of bills that are being sent out each month.
Thank you, Nancy. So let me go back. Did I hear you say we have 4.2 million in the bank, so to speak, right now?
No, we have 4.2 million technically owed to the city. If you want like a cash balance.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
can provide that later. I know you probably don't have that at your fingertips, but I would want that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so let's, Shannon, let's wrap up Public Works with your administration budget.
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I apologize. Public Works stayed on there, but this is Public Utilities Department.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
The utility billing, just a typo. So again, these are, so utility billing, right, is made up of our customer service, our billing department, and our collections groups, our sections. The recommended budget for salaries, again, was targeted to match the actuals. There was a slight increase to match those actuals. The utilities and contractuals, we did see the recommendation reduce to kind of align with actuals. So that was about a $250,000 savings there to align those. The repair and maintenance, again, not a lot of expense in repair and maintenance, but kind of making that match with actuals. So supplies, we did see a reduction of about over $500,000 in supplies. I may have to defer to Nancy, but because I do not have the note of what makes up that that amount of reduction, but you can see that the recommended does still try to fall more in line with the actuals. Insurance and claims, again, is provided through the finance department. Other operating costs does fluctuate, but in FY19 was around 800,000. Our recommendation now is 700,000, really to match a target, and seeing about a $300,000 reduction in other operating costs. And capital outlay was a purchase of a vehicle that we removed. Recommendation for this year, we're not recommending a vehicle, and a reduction of about 27,000. Overall, seeing a reduction of about $1 million, reduction about 21%. And if I could, I don't know if Nancy, if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of seconds to touch on, if you could help me remember what the reduction in supplies and other operating costs were that help us get to that number.
Yeah, absolutely. So under the supplies, we did have a lot of cubicles and chairs that needed to be replaced. Basically last fiscal year, we've got 8 customer service reps that were really in just one large building, or excuse me, one area of the building. And we did try to set up actual cubicles or kind of their own little office space. So that is part of the supplies. What also is part of the supplies is we, of course, have to pay for postage. We hope that we did not reduce the amount by too much, trying to meet the requirements of the budget reduction. And we really do try to push individuals to get email statements or bills rather than actually sending a piece of paper out each month. So those are kind of the larger cuts for the supplies, at least for that $579,000 reduction. The other operating costs, that reduction, if you'll remember a couple of months ago, Mountain River's contract, who is our consultant for our billing system, we did ask for a $700,000 amount for next fiscal year. And that was approved for only 6 months and $350,000. So that is really what the majority of that reduction, all of the reduction of that $328,000 in operating, other operating costs is equivalent for.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal.
just a quick question. So if the staff obviously is not in need of cubicles and chair replacements, are all of the customer service reps working from home now then?
No, actually, Counselor, we've never worked from home. Every single day we've been here in our offices. What the reduction is we purchased the cubicles and the chairs, so we don't now need to replace the cubicles and the chairs for this coming fiscal year.
Okay, but they're all there physically then?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we've never, I just can't with our phone system and what is required. We really can't be working from home and trying to take paperwork and personal information and you know, social security numbers and things like that. There's just not the ability for myself or any of my staff to be at their house doing any work. So they are here in the office at San Mateo. We have basically the whole bottom floor and all 28 to 30 of my employees, along with the cashiers, are here every day.
So did you then adjust the spaces, the workspaces, so that everybody was spread out more, or how'd you work that out?
Yeah, the cubicles were pretty much already spaced out the 6 feet. They do go about halfway up, so they're probably 10 feet tall. So there's the barrier, of course, in between each one of them. But yes, there's no you know, issues with space or the 6 feet you know, concern or anything like that. We are definitely following those. We've got the masks, we have the hand sanitizer, you know, we're providing everything, disinfectant, of course, for them to wipe their desks down, you know, every day. or as often as they'd like. So yes, we are covering everything.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna postpone the Public Utilities Department budget so that on Monday we can discuss BDD specifically. I know that yesterday from my notes, I think the request was 6.4 million, which is a 23% increase. Mr. Jones, you did a really good job today of talking about actuals. So it'd be helpful if during this discussion on Monday, if we can look at actuals for BDD the past 2 or 3 years, I think that would help. I know there was discussion regarding a lawsuit, and maybe that was one of the reasons why there was going to be an increase. So if we can get a little more information as to how that is being forecasted with costs as it relates to cost. Plus, there was also a comment that the less money we give as a city, the less water we're entitled to pull from the system. So I'd be interested to know if that is indeed the case. And then the city and county relationship as in regards to our contribution, I need to understand a better understanding of how that works. And if indeed we do reduce BDD's budget or our contribution towards it, does that mean the county needs to do the same? Or what impact will that have? So those are my notes. I would ask the committee if they would please email any other questions that they have specific to the BDD discussion on Monday. Councilwoman Lindell, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, could you summarize, do we have personnel-wise, perhaps Nancy could answer that. Do we have any additional hires, or what are the vacancies look like?
Chairman, Councilman Dale, you're talking specifically for the Buckman Direct Diversion?
No,
For public utilities?
correct.
Okay. We are working close with HR, so there are specific positions that we have put a pin in now that we're not actively recruiting for, that would allow some of the sections to realize some salary savings. The essential critical positions that run most thin, we are still actively searching for. Those include our drivers for environmental services, water plant operators, and wastewater plant operators. Those are still actively being sought. I believe the Buckman Direct Diversion is the only operational facility that doesn't have vacancies in the operational section. But Jonathan Montoya, who runs a source of supply up on Kenyon Road, I know is trying to fill a couple of operator positions. Manuel Sanchez and his team at Environmental Services under Shirley Sitton are again actively seeking truck drivers and mechanics. So those searches are still continuing, and we're still working to fill those. If I had to put a number, I'd say we're probably running at about 80 to 85% staffed, which is still pretty typical. What we want to do is we got to make sure that we're hiring people at least as fast as they are moving or resigning to maintain status quo.
How about administratively or in billing?
Okay.
Councilor Lindell, so right now we have in utility billing, we have 2 vacant positions that we were asked to not fill, which is my customer service supervisor and customer service rep. In light of what I believe is transpiring through parking, I believe one of those positions, the customer service rep, is asked to be filled. However, I have had a conversation with Mr. Jones that might not potentially be the best avenue for the staffing levels here at utility billing. I really do need the supervisor. The customer service rep, in the year that I've been here, I've really been trying to evaluate each section within utility customer service and billing. And I've really found that we're overstaffed in potentially customer service area and not staffed in my billing section. So I do have, I completely and totally understand parking's issues, and I don't want anyone obviously to lose their job. But I also have to be able to feel comfortable in running a division also. So I think that might hopefully helpful for some of your questions about personnel. And then also under utility customer service, we do have a vacant cashier. I don't directly supervise the cashiers, but we do have a vacant cashier, and my understanding is one of those parking individuals would potentially be filling the cashier. I have a conversation with their supervisor, Stephen Morales, and my understanding is we definitely do need the cashier. So we, again, are very hopeful that many of the people can find jobs within the city of Santa Fe, and we don't have to go further with ever, letting people go or anything like that. But those basically are the 3 positions within utility billing customer service that I believe you're asking, specifically for salary and benefit purposes.
I appreciate that, Ms. Jimenez. I trust you implicitly to know the personnel that you need and what training that personnel would need to serve the function that they're asked to. And I hope that, Mr. Jones, you'll continue to have conversations with Nancy about this so that we end up being as efficient as we possibly can be and giving the customer service that we absolutely want to give. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to request that the information that we are asking for regarding some of these pieces with BDD, as well as some of the conversation we were having earlier with MRC, if we could get this info by Friday so that we have the weekend to review in time for those Monday meetings to ensure that they're efficient, I would really appreciate that. That was all.
Great. Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add to your list on BDD. I think it would be helpful for us to understand in a non-COVID year how the budget process between BDD staff, the county, the city, how that works, and then what happened this year that brought us to this moment. Just to better understand how the budget is normally developed and what's happening that's different this year. I think it would also be helpful for us to see to Director Jones laying out sort of the actuals versus what's being proposed and what's the difference between those two things. And then a greater understanding of the city's role in the management of BDD. We are, by agreement, the fiscal agent and the manager of that facility. There's an agreement between the county and Las Campanas, and I think it would be helpful to understand in greater detail the city's role. And what we do in that role. So those are things I'd add to your list, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Just wanted to finish what we had started about the administration for what changes were made salary or staff wise, because there's an increase on that section.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So if I could ask if they could share the screen again. There was one more slide that talked about the Public Utilities Administration. It is different than utility billing. The administration is made up of myself, a fiscal administrator, office manager, our senior financial analyst, and our regulatory compliance. The intent of the administration is we provide support and oversight to the departments. So as we went through with the recommendation, The alignment with the salaries is moving those positions back into the administration. If I may, so the administration's budget is funded from the 3 enterprise funds. Water, wastewater, environmental services pay a percentage for the service that I just described. Through movement and salaries, it is typical that some of those positions show up specifically on one division, and that's typically the water division. And so what we're doing is trying to right size that so that the salaries are split between the 3. So you'd see a reduction of salaries in water, an increase in administration, and then that cost would be delineated between the 3 enterprise. So specifically like regulatory compliance. Our regulatory compliance officer is Alex Puglisi. He does play a tremendous role with the water division, but he's also instrumental in environmental services and their work on plans to close landfills, wastewater with MPDS permits and administrative orders. His salary should be paid by all 3, and I believe it was only being paid by water. And so we moved that into administration to get that split. I'm not saying that that's all just Alex, but other ones that come in are, I believe we fund a financial position for procurement. Again, that shouldn't just be board by water. So we bring that into administration so it can be split between the 3 utilities. Other than that, not a lot of other expense, stayed relatively flat. There was some other cost savings. I think so we did see a reduction of 48,000, which was like, mainly I think a reduction in, so contracts that we oversee is like our financial consultant, Jason Mom, who's presented. We manage that out of utility admin. And so again, each portion of the utilities funds that. But to get the high level, that contract is administered through Public Utilities Administration.
So for the salaries, it's yours, you said fiscal analyst?
Senior financial analyst.
Senior financial.
Right.
And then the office manager, a senior analyst?
An office manager, a fiscal administrator. So fiscal administrator, office manager, myself, regulatory compliance, and senior financial analyst. And there's also an administrative assistant that make up that section.
And then a percentage for the financial procurement person?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, can I have a motion to postpone the Public Utilities Department budget?
Move to postpone.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signey Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Roman Tiger Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to move to Community Development Department, the proposed Community Development Department, and we will start with Economic Development.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Sorry, I was on attendee level. Rich Brown, I am the new Director of Community Development Department, and I wanted to sort of go through what this department is, and then we'll make our way through the different groups who will each division manager will actually explain their budget changes. And I will start with economic development, which is where I had originally led the department and still will as a part of community development. So the new Community Development Department is being created to support where business and arts and culture thrive. And again, we're going to create wealth and uplift in our community And as you see from the slides here, there will be 6 departments under this group. One thing I wanted to sort of add that's not in this mission overview is that this group will be a little bit more entrepreneurial than the services group. It'll be our job to reach out, be innovative, so that we can show some performance results around how we are creating uplift, how we're stimulating our economy, how we're providing equity into the community with our residents, and also as we face this pandemic, how do we address some of the issues that are constant as businesses try to struggle between opening, closing, how to be safe, how to be not. Next slide, if you could. So I want to start with economic development and go through some of the changes that we had in that department. Basically, what we've done is that you'll see that there's been a 20% increase, 25% increase in the recommended budget from FY20. Our general fund was decreased by 28%, and I'll go through some of the changes that happened there that are common, and then some things that are unique to us. For the personnel side of the general fund, we have 50% furlough for 4 pay periods for the director, which is me, and then we have 10% furlough for 4 pay periods for all the employees in the general fund area, and we have 2 different funds. There are no pay cuts or layoffs in economic development, but we do have our furloughs for those 4 pay periods. Some of the big changes in our staff for the general fund is that I am taking on a new role as the community development director. We were originally lost an asset development manager as an FTE, and we're going to bring that role back. So you'll see an increase in the budget for the asset development manager. As you know, we have about 6 or 7 parcels of land, properties that we're trying to activate and put up for public sale, which will help us with our budget deficit and also to stimulate our economy and help with our community. We're also transferring an executive admin from City Hall to economic development, and so that'll happen after all of these hearings are approved and changes are being made and documents are signed. Other big changes in the staff on the enterprise fund side, which is actually 212, we have 2 vacancies for broadband manager and for economic development specialists, so they will not be filled in the next fiscal year, this coming fiscal year, and that also my role is actually split. My funding, my POL funding, is split between these 2 funds, general fund and economic development fund. Some key things around non-personnel and operating costs. The Midtown Engagement Mini Grants were moved to the Midtown bond budget, which was about $60,000. We're working through public engagement right now, so those grants will be activated sometime in the next couple of months. And then all of our major vendor contracts, the Business Incubator, YouthWorks Score, Make Santa Fe, there are no changes to those contracts, so we will keep the same level as FY20 going into FY21. And then we will have some decreases in supplies and insurance, and in our operating costs, we will have a decrease of $16,000, and that is a decrease in advertising. And we're hoping to make up some of that funding as we sell public land that will go back into our enterprise fund to be used for enterprise and economic development activity. So that's kind of the bigger issue, bigger changes that we've made. With that, I'll stand for questions for this department, keeping in mind that the other departments will take you through all of their budget changes for FY21.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I was stuck on your mission statement.
Okay.
It looks like you're a work in progress.
Yes.
Hopefully you'll get the divisions to weigh in to kind of formalize that. Yeah. But for this purposes, I think it's fine, but probably need to rescope that. Just curious how this works out for you as the new department director, and yet also wearing the hat of the economic development division director, yet there's also a pay cut involved. So how does that work in terms of the sustainability of you as a person, but also just the multiple roles that takes. I mean, that's like overarching management of all divisions and then also what's occurring in the economic development division.
Mr. Chair, Council Villarreal. Yes, yeah, to answer some of your questions. So I will have a modest pay increase taking on this role because I'll be managing 6 departments versus 1. And then as it relates to economic development, you know, to your point about the mission and it's a work in progress, is that we are going to work over the next couple months to how we show the merger of these departments. You know, some are industry sectors, tourism, some is culture, some is land use, some is economic development, some is housing. So all those departments really do work together to create some conditions that allow us to address our housing issue, address how to reach out to the community. You know, the perfect example is our Mask and Promise campaign included 3 of the 5 of those divisions as we got our message out there. So we do see this merger of these departments. And as it relates to economic development, I will still have a pretty strong staff still. And with the addition of the asset development manager, I'll be able to sort of take some of the larger burden of the key activities in economic development off my plate. And that person will be able to sort of go through and get those transactions done for all those parcels and properties that we're going after.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I see the connections between most of the divisions within this. The one piece I didn't catch, I'm sorry, just because trying to focus on too many things here, but what did you say was changing for economic development in terms of staffing?
Yeah, for staffing changes on the general fund side, we are adding back the asset development manager. It was an open vacancy, and so we're going to fill that role. And then we're also having an executive admin from City Hall is transferring over to our Department of Economic Development. And on the enterprise fund side, we had 2 vacancies. We had a broadband communications manager who was vacant, and we have not been able to fill that. We had a 10-person earlier. And then we also had a second economic development specialist, and that role is still going to be vacant for the fiscal year. So we're hoping that economic conditions improve so that in the FY22, we're able to fill those in. We will be working with the IT department on our broadband telecommunications plan. So there will be work done there. It's just that we don't have a specific person who's driving it at a pace that's faster than you know, normally you'll see.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Councilwoman Villarreal?
Not at the moment.
Okay, Councilor Rivera, your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor, or thank you, Mr. Chair. So you identified yourself as a director of multiple departments, is that correct? Or divisions?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, I will take on the role of the director of this community development department. And so the divisions in the previous 2 slides up, those 6 divisions, housing, tourism, land use, arts and culture, recreation, and economic development will then fall under my purview as division managers.
So a question for the city manager is, how can somebody take the role of a department director when it hasn't been approved by the council yet?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, all of this is pending the approval of the governing body.
Well, it sounds like it already happened, so
No,
is that
I have,
true or not?
it is not true. I have asked Rich to serve in that capacity if this is approved by the governing body.
If it's approved.
If
Correct.
it's approved.
Nothing has gone, no changes have been made. The conversation was had to, that I asked him to serve in that role if this is approved by the governing body.
So no differences in pay changes, no differences in who's answering to who. Is that correct? He hasn't assumed that role yet.
That is correct. He has not assumed that role yet.
All right. It sounds based on what he said that he's already taken the position. So that's my concern.
Mr. Chair, Council Rivera, I did only because of the way this org chart's laid out. So this is the scenario and we're in a hearing. And so I wanted to make sure there was some clarity around why you see this org chart that is not what you normally see for a department. So it is. So
I understand this is a proposal though. This is not set in stone yet until the governing body approves it.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Rivera, that is absolutely correct. This is our proposal and the proposed staffing within should such said proposal be approved.
Thank you. Just want to make sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Okay, Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to follow up on Councilor Rivera's question. First, I'd like to ask, what administrative, City Hall is a big place, so what administrative position is being transferred over? And what is that function currently being performed?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, if I may. Sure. That is the executive position, the executive administrator in the city manager's office. As we'll go through tomorrow when we do the city manager budget, the way that we got to city management reduction was there's 2 people in that office. And so that is what that is.
Thank you. The next question relates to Councilor Rivera's question as well, and that is, I'm just going to remind the committee when I first made my comments yesterday, is I'm very curious about statuses. And I realize in these charts, and there's a couple here, or maybe one here, where current people have exempt status. And I want to have a discussion when the time comes about more specifically what statuses these employees have now and what statuses, if any, will change. And the direction that I will go is researching whether or not that can be done fait accompli without regard to rules and regs, or will the rules and regs allow for that? And will probationary periods be served? So so that's just something that I don't need an answer on now, but we'll still be following. Then for Mr. Brown, I didn't hear you mention anything about the Economic Advisory Board in your presentation. And I would like to know if that board is still going to be, I didn't hear you say anything about it, but I think the people on the board would want to know. And then I definitely, as chair, want this reorganization to go before the board. I know they're only advisory, and that's important. They do express to me, probably more so than you know, that they want to be involved in, not involved, but at least advised. Advisory board is a two-way street. So they want to be advised. I don't think any of them have a clue except me about what's going on here. And I don't know that that should come from me. And if it should, then I'll await your advice. But nobody likes surprises. And I think this is going to be very surprising to them. So I just give you that as a heads up, and definitely would want this on the next agenda, the next meeting agenda. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could, Mr. Chair, Council Vihil Coppler. Yes, the Economic Development Advisory Committee is still a part of our scenario as an economic development group. And as it relates to community development, I think if this organization scenario is approved, I think that's something that we can speak of in another meeting to figure out where it fits. I know that it'll be a part of the Quality of Life Committee, and it probably will be a part of our discussions in EDAC as we sort of come back to normal with an EDAC committee. But Economic Development Advisory Committee will be still a part of the ongoing committee meetings that we've had before. It is not going away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, thank you, Councilwoman Vihel Koppler, for your comments. I introduced an ordinance at the beginning of today's agenda regarding the reorg. And so I think if we can get comments and questions like that put together that Vihel Koppler gave, so that we could have those types of discussions, not here as we do the budgets, but when we actually look at the ordinance, which is scheduled for City Council on August 26th. So that's when I would like to have those discussions. But I think as it comes up and we see what's being proposed throughout the budget hearings, like Vihel Koppler did, let's raise the question or the issue so that the staff can then respond to that on the 26th when we're hearing the ordinance. Mr. Brown, did you have any other comments regarding the Economic Development Division?
Mr. Chair, members of the council, I do not. Those are the major changes as you see on this economic development schedule. And then I turn it over to the next department if I could.
Okay, before we do that, are there any other questions regarding the Economic Development budget? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on to Planning and Land Use.
I think he might be on his panel.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for being here today. I will be running us through the planning and land use budget. Also available is Assistant Director Jason Kluk to answer any questions should they come up. But as you see here on the first slide, you have the Planning and Land Use Department mission, as well as a org chart of how we are organized within planning and land use. We consist of 6 divisions currently: building permits, historic preservation, inspections and enforcement, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, our current planning division, and technical review. So with that, I think we can transition to the next slide, and I can run through some of the higher level changes, unless there's questions before we're ready to proceed.
Yeah, did someone?
I did.
Yes, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Just a quick question. So about language. So the Community Development Department has 5 or 6 divisions, correct? So if this proposal goes through, the building and permits, historic preservation, inspection, enforcement, all of those would become sections, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth. I would, if possible, defer that question to a representative from Human Resources. I am not entirely clear on how, if approved, how this reorganization would impact.
Okay, because it seems, it doesn't have to be answered now. It may be in the legislation that was referred to, that was introduced earlier that I haven't seen yet, but I think that's how you have to go: department, division, sections, but we'll leave that for another day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to the next slide. Here we have an overview of the budget changes to the Planning and Land Use Department. Our total FY21 recommended budget decrease is $989,000, representing a 15% decrease from the previous fiscal year. Planning and Land Use's general fund recommended budget for FY21 decreased by $1 million or 17% from FY20. The difference can be explained by a $60,000 transfer into Fund 250, which we will look at later, as well as a $3,000 transportation grant to the MPO, the difference of 63 $1,000. So that's that difference between the 15% change from our overall budget and the 17% change from our general fund budget. Moving on, I can take questions after each slide, or I can run through the divisions.
Well, Eli, we'll go through each division and we'll ask you questions specific to that division when we're on that slide.
Perfect. Perfect. So the first division is building permits. The building permit division ensures code compliance for the preservation of life, safety, and the general welfare for the people of the city of Santa Fe through the performance of residential and commercial plan review and permit services. This division is also responsible for administering the Green Building Code. So here you can see we have almost $175,000 decrease in salary, wages, and benefits. That's due to 2 vacancies in the department, a small decrease in supplies to better align with actuals from the previous fiscal year, an increase in insurance, which I think is being seen consistently through all divisions that we've reviewed up to this point. A further reduction in other operating costs, that's mostly in the areas of training and travel, for a total 24% reduction across the division, representing $180,000.
Okay, questions regarding the building permit section? Let's start with Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Eli. The thing that clearly enough jumps out here is a reduction of $174,000 on salaries, wages, and benefits. The other numbers are pretty small comparatively. So how do you absorb that kind of reduction when it's my understanding that we're having a pretty sizable increase in applications? And maybe I'm wrong on that. You could correct me for sure if I am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Lindell, I appreciate the question. You are correct. We are seeing an increase in the number of applications year to year, both for 2018 and 2019. How we're dealing with that? We're dealing with it several ways. One of the vacancies was created by an internal promotion of our permit expediter to a planner in historic preservation. That transfer has been delayed due to the needs of the overall department, specifically in building permits. We also, as part of last year's budget, reorganized the Planning and Land Use Department and created 2 assistant director positions. Much of the additional workload caused by the vacancies in building permits has fallen on the shoulders of Assistant Director Jason Klug. He deserves quite a bit of credit for working in our department to allow us to transition to the e-permitting system that we have up and running as response to COVID. But that is, I don't know if that is a long-term, if that's a sustainable way of dealing with these vacancies. The other vacancy, while we're discussing it, was created by another internal promotion of a project specialist into, Richard Trujillo, who is now our building permits division manager. So that's how these vacancies were created. I think we, as we look forward and hopefully are in a position to rebuild the land use department, both of those positions are top priorities in terms of getting those refilled.
All right, so I'll ask a hard question. What's your level of comfort with the personnel numbers in building permits right now? With this, I mean, it's such an important area to get people their permits and get them going. How how's this gonna slow us down, Eli?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Lindell. This is permitting, as you know, as a long-standing member of the governing body, permitting is always a challenge. There's always pressure on the department to increase the speed at which we process and issue permits. This area is one that I think I would very much like to see be built back first, if we are in a position to add new positions and fill vacancies. I am concerned about our long-term. I think we've seen a small reduction in our turnaround times, largely due to a new way of doing business in the department. However, I think the vacancies are also contributing to that, and are an area where we need to look hard and see if there aren't opportunities to fill these positions as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I see Councilor Rivera's hand is up. Councilor Rivera, did you have a question?
I didn't, Mr. Chair. That was a old hand. I apologize.
Okay, Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a new hand. Eli, I wanted to ask about, I was going to ask about permits. I think that's an excellent question by Councilor Lindell, because we get a lot of complaints from our business people that it takes a long time for permits. I think it's improved. But on the other hand, that's something that touches every builder, whereby, time is money for them. So thank you for doing what you can to speed it up. And I do believe that with these cuts, it might be a little harder, but I trust you'll keep an eye on it. The biggest thing I have is in enforcement. And we, as a city council, we do pass a lot of rules. We're getting ready to pass more. I think all the council is clearly concerned about making our community a better place and more responsive. But the biggest thing is on, what we have, and you and I know, because I've talked to you about several things, we rely on our constituents to tattletale. And we don't, get out in front of the rules and ordinances and resolutions that we create. We don't have enough people, I believe, in enforcement to go and, check on neighborhoods, check on what's going on. Many times things are going on in full view, and there's not anything really done about it unless the neighbor calls it in. And you and I have had a fair share of that. And it's kind of a bad position to be on. And many constituents that talk to me tell me this is not our job. This is not our job to do the enforcement for police, because it creates unruly neighbors and it creates a lot of unhappiness in neighborhoods. And a lot of this too is in the short-term rentals. That's big, and you already know that. So I think one of the issues with that is that we haven't enforced our rules on that, and it's grown into a bigger issue than maybe it would have. So within this budget, how comfortable are you with having the resources you need to not only do status quo, but to get out in front of this enforcement issue?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vihil Coppler. Before answering that question, I would like to take the opportunity, as you mentioned, things are getting better in building permits, and I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the efforts of that team. That team has been working tremendously hard through the pandemic, and we as a group have really changed the way we do business, and it's caused some frustration on the part of our contracting community. But I think as we continue to iron out those processes, that group's been instrumental in supporting the construction industry in Santa Fe. So I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize those contributions. In terms of related to your more specific question, I think we are, land use, like many of the other departments at the city, we are confronted with a very challenging fiscal proposition, revenue proposition. I think right now with the vacancies that we have and the staffing levels that we're at, unfortunately, I think status quo is probably more in line with where we're going to be for the time being. I think it's going to be very difficult with where we're at to, make the transition into being more proactive, whether it be in building enforcement or STR enforcement. But I think we are figuring out ways to do our jobs more efficiently and more effectively with the resources we do have now. I think that's being demonstrated with our performance over the past few months. And we hope that once we are presented with an opportunity to add some of these key staff people back to our team, that those dividends will pay off and we'll be able to leverage those new ways of doing business into better enforcement, better, more proactive engagement with the community in terms of enforcement and permitting and everything else that we do.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So Eli, moving on to historic preservation, I noticed that there isn't significant changes here, maybe with a 34% reduction in other operating costs. What is that?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, you'll see in almost every division a pretty significant change in other operating costs. The majority of those reductions are in the areas of training and travel. I think in trying to anticipate, what the next year looks like in terms of professional development, conferences, other types of things that necessitate travel per diem and those types of expenses. We just don't see a lot of those happening. There was a handful of us slated to attend the American Planning Association National Conference in Houston this past April. That would have been in FY20's budget. That conference was canceled, for instance, and our dues and registration fees refunded. And so I think we've made cuts there, anticipating that we will not be doing a lot of that professional development type work over the next year. However, if conditions change and these types of events and training opportunities do become available, we're hoping that would be met with a similar increase in our revenues and be able to start participating in those types of events more frequently.
Okay, Councilor Rivera, I see your hand up regarding historic preservation.
Thank you. This is a new hand. I appreciate it. So Eli, there were positions initially that were difficult positions to hire because of qualifications and other things. Is this going to affect you? This decrease in funding going to affect you in any way?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Rivera, could you be slightly more specific? What specific decrease in funding and affect us in what specific way?
With regards to personnel, your personnel needs specific, what's it called, licensure or requirements to do their job. And I just want to make sure that you have the personnel that you need with the training that they need or education that they need to fill their jobs.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Rivera. So I haven't in the budget that's before you, these other operating costs, we haven't slashed them to zero. And the thinking behind that was to provide some money if we are in a situation where we can refill a position, to make sure we have the funds available to get them the proper training if they don't come to us with all the necessary certifications. So there is some money there. And that's the thinking behind it. In a larger sense, the question you're asking is, we have historically have had a difficult time filling vacant positions, especially in some of our more vacant, or excuse me, more technical areas, whether it be plan review, inspections, other things like that. Engineering has been, we have an engineering position that's been vacant. You know, it has no, COVID has no bearing on that vacancy. We've tried to fill that several times since I've been with the city. And so it's difficult to find qualified people that are interested in working with the city now. I think part of that maybe had to do with the strength of the private sector. If we see changes there, there may become more interest in public sector employment. So that may help. But no, that's a constant concern for us. And I think it's one that we had that came up in our conversations with finance and the administration in putting this proposal together was, the need to, maintain our current staff as best as possible. We've invested quite a bit in our team in terms of continuing education, certifications, professional, participation in professional organizations. And so, it's very important that we, maintain the level of staff that we have now, and then also make sure that the funding is there to get the proper education and training to new people.
So have we cut any of those positions that are hard to fill?
We have not cut any positions in this proposed land use budget. I think that was no pay cuts, no furloughs, and we maintain all of our existing positions. The question will come when it comes time to fill vacancies. Will we find the people we need available to take those positions? And that's an ongoing challenge that the department has. That's sort of related to, but not directly impacted by our budget situation.
Thank you, Eli. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Since we've been jumping around, I'm kind of lost where we're at. We've been going back to like overall land use, and now we're on historic preservation, correct?
Yes, historic preservation.
All right. So there's a contract. I was just curious what the new contract that was added, if I'm reading this right, or it was under contractuals and utilities for the Historic Preservation Fund?
Yes.
60,000. Can you describe what that is?
Absolutely. So, and credit to staff and Division Manager Lisa Roach specifically. Let me pull up just a quick description of that project. So this past year, we, I should say the department, but specifically Lisa, was awarded $45,000 to begin the first phase of a long-range heritage preservation planning project. And that $45,000 was given through the Certified Local Governments Program. And there was a $20,000, or actually a $25,000 cash match associated with that. When we applied for it last year, there was strong indication that they would support a multi-phase, multi-year project. And so that 60,000 represents the $60,000 that we would potentially receive from CLG in a second round of grant funding. If you look above on the same sheet, and I apologize, I have 8 million screens open, but the transfers out of the $20,000, that represents next year's available money for a cash match if we are awarded a second round of grant funding.
And that was for, it's hard to hear you, Eli, a little bit,
I'm
but
sorry.
historic preservation planning.
Correct. And the project is that better, Councilor Villarreal? In terms of hearing me? Can you
Yes,
hear me
I can
better?
hear better. Thank you.
So the Heritage Preservation Plan seeks to define an updated vision for the city's historic preservation program, to articulate core values related to the preservation of the city's heritage resources, and to identify key strategies for integrating these values into updates to land use regulations, preservation programming, and a vision for the future growth and development of the city. And so that is, that's phase one, or that's kind of the project overview. Phase one is doing a lot of archival research, quantitative data analysis, and story gathering. And then phase two, which will be centered around public engagement, inclusive dialogue, in order to define values, visions, and strategies that will guide how our heritage resources are preserved, and then also looking at ways that we can update our code to support those values. And the code portion of that will be done in phase two.
Got it. Thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, any other questions regarding historic preservation? Okay, Eli, then inspections and enforcement is next. I don't see any major changes to this division. You explained other operating costs. We do see a little bit of a decrease. That's, like you said, training and travel probably. But other than that, I don't really see any major changes with inspections and enforcement. Do we have questions from the committee regarding inspections and enforcement?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal.
the bump of increase for the staff was due to what again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal. So that was really just due to having some folks in the wrong munis org codes in our POL. And so as we put people in their proper business units, there were some changes in the salaries and benefits. However, there were no, salary increases or raises or anything like that given to any staff members.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this the budget where we would see the host compliance contract?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth. No, so we have that in a line item. All of our contracts and services are kept in a line item in the land use admin budget. However, that contract is slated to be renewed should the budget be approved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Renewed or removed? What did you say?
Oh, excuse me, renewed for another year.
Thank you.
Okay, then we are on MPO. So Eli, do you want to describe MPO for us briefly? It looks like it's primarily grant funded.
Thank you, Chairman. That is correct. The MPO is funded through a federal transportation grants. If you look at the numbers there, the 10% increase in salaries benefits is carryover from FY19. The reductions of 10,000 and 12,300, those reductions are based off a federal formula that is used to allocate resources to metropolitan planning organizations across the country. And so that was not a decision made by the land use department or the city. That was done at the federal level.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I remember this right, this, whatever we're calling it, division section, used to reside in Public Works. Am I correct about that? Are we moving? We've moved it over into this new department and under your division.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Romero Worth. I'm not entirely clear historically where MPO has sat over the years. It's been in planning and land use ever since I've been with the city, however. So this is not, does not represent any sort of reorganization or any changes to the overall organizational chart of the city. MPO has always been a division within planning and land use since I've been.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, this is Andy. It's been in planning and land use since I've been here for 19 years. It wasn't always a division unto itself as it is now, but it was located within planning and land use for for quite a while now. It's been at least 19 years because it's been there the whole time I've been here.
All right, maybe I'm confusing it with the fact that its offices were over there with Public Works.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, can I answer that question? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Councilor Romero-Worth. The MPO was actually, Andy, I'm sorry, I'm going to contradict you publicly. It was part of the Housing and Community Development Department. So beginning in, I believe I want to say 2008 or so, the Housing and Community Development Department was created. It could have been 2010, and it was Affordable Housing, Economic Development, the MPO, and Long Range Planning. And that was disbanded maybe 3 years ago. And the MPO,
You're right, I forgot about that.
yeah, sorry, Andy. The MPO was moved into land use at that time.
Okay,
But it wasn't land use before then, before it was moved there to that short-lived department. But yeah, you're right, it was there. I forgot about that little interlude.
Okay, so, but I guess the main point is it's not new to planning and land use. Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have a match that we have to provide for MPO?
It's the funding, we can, I can bring Eric Ani, he's the division manager, and if we have any more specific questions. It's an 80-20 relationship, and that 20% is funded by the partner organizations through a JPA, and those organizations are Santa Fe County, the City of Santa Fe, and Tsuke.
And just to interject again, sorry, that matching fund comes from the 0.5% GRT fund. It is currently a transfer into MPO in the amount of $52,480.
Perfect. Thank you. That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you both so much.
Okay, any other questions regarding MPO?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilor Rivera.
Thank you. Following up on Councilor Romero-Worth, I sat on that committee for a while, and it seems like most of the discussion was around really roads and trails. And in that sense, since we're looking at reorganization, maybe it fits better under Public Works than it does under planning and land use. So I think I would ask the city manager to take a look at that and probably have some discussion with John and with Eric and also with Eli and see if it's really in the right place.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. I agree. I think that's something that we should take a look at as we move with the reorg. So if you can make a note, Eli, and talk to the manager about that, that would be great.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so we're on the planning division now. Again, I don't see major reductions, but do you want to explain to us, Eli, current planning and then long range planning real briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So the long range planning function is, this is just another bit of POL housekeeping. That money funds one of our senior planner positions in current planning. And so we have dissolved that, that business unit and consolidated it into current planning. So that is the 100% reduction of that unit.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
So Eli, is that also take into account, we had two long range planners? Are those planning positions no longer part of the staff makeup?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, thank you. So it's my understanding, both of those, the individuals in those two long-range planning positions retired right around the time I joined the city. I believe one of them was reassigned, if you will, during last year's budget process. And this one was discovered through going through the POL as part of the budget process. And this, but the job had already sort of been reassigned. And so it's a matter of just cleaning up the POL to reflect where our personnel are working.
So we're not really doing long range planning anymore, correct?
So I think that's an accurate statement. However, part of last year's budget, if you remember, $250,000 was set aside in our contracts and services line item, and that money was earmarked to begin a 3 to 5 year program of long-range planning, working with staff, but also working closely with outside consultants to help us with that effort. We do have, was before, as sort of the world changed, I was working closely with procurement to issue a RFP for a land use code review and revision. That project is currently on hold until we see where our revenues are, and hopefully that's something we can move forward with later this year. But the department is still very serious about long-range planning, sees the need for long-range planning in the city, and we are working and looking at different avenues and opportunities to do some form of long-range planning this year and certainly in the years moving forward.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on that, so I think that's all very interesting. I remember when Carol Johnson was here, she had pretty ambitious long-range planning agenda or goals. She didn't get very far in that, I take it. That was mostly internal before she left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth. I think we did make some important strides in that direction during Carol's time with the city. She and I worked closely in sort of devising this multi-year plan for reinvigorating long-range planning in the land use department. And one of the critical first steps in doing that was the reorganization of our department, which we were able to do. It took a little bit longer than I think we had initially expected, but by the fall of last year, we had both assistant director positions created and filled, and it was only within 6 weeks of getting those positions filled that Carol Johnson announced her last day. And so there's been some challenges, just internal changes and things like that that have delayed us a little bit in getting out of the gate with these projects. However, one of my key responsibilities when I was, first assistant director and then interim director was getting this RFP put together and ready to advertise. And so that's was literally, something we were ready to put out on the street, and then the bottom fell out from under us. And so, we are very interested in moving forward with that, and are hoping we can do so later this year, if not years coming.
Great, thank you. I've actually been wondering about that, so that's very helpful. Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
I'm sorry, I should have taken my hand down. My questions were also about the long-range planning component, but my colleagues have covered it. So thank you both. And thank you, Eli, for your answers.
Okay, then technical review. Eli, I don't see that there's really any changes in technical review, that budget. There's minor, but when you look at the overall budget, there's a 1% increase. Are there questions from the committee regarding technical review? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about Dee's position and if we're going to hire for that position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal. That position, I think the position you're referencing is our Green Building Code Specialist position. That is actually part of our, building permits division. It's not in technical review. We hope to be able to hire for that position. That position is a very important position. It does both plan review, but also does inspections. So it's one of those positions that's difficult to fill and difficult to cover for. Right now, we've split those responsibilities amongst other staff and building permits and some of our inspections people. So we're sort of getting by now, but I think that is definitely a position that is a priority position.
Is that in the budget right now?
That position is slated to remain vacant in this budget. However, it's again one of those priority positions that we'd like to refill.
So we lost two people from that. Catherine and Dee were both doing, I thought, green building code plan review and inspection. So who's going to be doing that now?
Correct. So Catherine Mortimer was in the green building group. She, I think, spent some time in environmental services before, I think she has now retired. And then Dee. So as I mentioned, the plan review is being done by our residential plan review team. The plan review piece is actually is some of the more straightforward aspect of that job. It's the inspections piece that is takes some getting familiar with, and that's being done by multiple people in our inspections and enforcement. So that's how we've sort of dealt with that loss. But again, it's definitely one of the positions that we've identified as a priority position to fill should we be able to do so moving forward.
Well, there is somewhat of a expertise in this that not all people in the residential plan review would necessarily know about. So how are you figuring that out? Because I see that as potential problems when we're trying to do plan reviews and inspections without some of that expertise that Dee brought. And maybe you have a plan for it, but just the way I'm not understanding completely how that's going to be filled.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal. So we did have a couple weeks of heads up of Delinda's departure. We were able to use that time to do some cross training. The plan review piece, there is some training involved. Dee being, the expert that she was able to bring our residential team up to speed pretty quickly. Also on the inspection side, she was able to work with folks both in plumbing and general building to help teach them, train them on how to do the inspections for the green building code. So was there 100% knowledge transfer? I don't think so. Was there enough knowledge transfer to ensure that we are doing a good job of ensuring that the code is being followed in the city? I think we are, but again, just in terms of overall capacity in the department, I think that's an important position that needs to be filled. So should that become an opportunity, we will definitely look into it.
Well, I see it more of a gap that we need to fulfill. I mean, whether it's training people in that area with the staff we have or filling that position later. But I think that's a big piece if we're trying to fulfill our goals with the green building code. And then there's some adjustments that still need to be made with the green building code. And who will be taking that on?
So that handoff happened with our assistant director, Jason Klug. He will now be in charge of the updates to the green building code. It was close to being where it needed to be when Delinda left. I don't think it's quite ready to move forward through the legislative process. But again, that's another, piece of legislation that we will need to evaluate our staffing level prior to moving forward with adopting any new codes or regulations in the city. I think that is probably the biggest challenge right now is that's probably something we need to keep in mind before we propose any new legislation that would require additional inspection and plan review work by the department.
Okay, well, I'm interested in that change, those legislative pieces when we get to that point. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, then let's wrap up land use with the administration division.
Mr. Chair, if
yes.
I could, I'd just like to also express my interest with Councilor Villarreal on those changes. Thank you.
Okay. So Eli, the biggest change in the administration is I see a 52% reduction in salaries, wages, and benefits. And then there's a 50% reduction, but it's still much larger than actuals for contractuals and utilities. So can you explain those two to us?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the large change in the salaries and benefits in the land use in the admin division, there's one reason for that is the existing vacancy of my old position as assistant land use director. So that's a good chunk of that. And then the rest of it is we had our code compliance team that handles code violation, property maintenance, STR enforcement. That group was actually in the admin business unit, Munis Org Code. And so we pulled them out and they are now in enforcements and inspections. So that explains that large number there. It's really only one vacancy.
Okay, and then contractuals and utilities, your actuals were only 94,000. You're proposing 220,500, which is less, almost half of what you were budgeted last year.
Yes. So I'm not sure where the F19 actuals number. I would ask Mary and maybe Andy to help verify that number, because it's my understanding that we've actually spent more closely to 350 of that this year. The 439 represents the additional money received last year through the budget process for the long range planning program that we discussed earlier. That number has been reduced by 218,000, a 50% reduction as part of land uses sort of tools available to us to meet our budget reduction goals, was to reduce that line item.
But you feel 220 is appropriate?
Yes, I do feel that 220 is appropriate. A lot of that money in the last year, and the reason why I'm wondering if the F19 actual money is correct, is a lot of that money went towards contractual agreements or contractual service agreements, excuse me, with engineering support in our terrain management. As we lost some staff, we needed some support both on the engineering and inspection side. We spent roughly about $120,000 on those services last year. We're keeping some money in reserve in case we need that support again this year. That also includes the host compliance contract that Councilor Romero Worth alluded to earlier, as well as a financial reconciliation contract we're working on with finance to reconcile our financial guarantees. And then every year we do about $60,000 to $70,000 in scanning of our permit documents and other documentation to archive and assist with HIPAA requests and other types of document retrieval needs. So that, I think, again, I would love to see that number increase. The more that number increases, the more able the Planning and Land Use Department is to start tackling some of these long-range planning issues that we've been talking about. But this number as it is now will cover us at sort of a base level, and hopefully we can build from there.
Okay, other questions regarding the land use administration budget? Okay, can I have a motion regarding the planning and land use department budget?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so I would move to approve with the exception of the MPO. So I don't know whether how you want to handle that, whether it should be moved, whether we make a motion to recommend that the MPO be moved to Public Works, or
I think, yeah, let's make a motion to approve it with the recommendation that it be moved to Public Works as part of the overall reorg that is
Sure.
gonna. Yes.
I disagree with that change until staff is they can just talk with staff instead of us deciding, because we don't know the ins and outs and structures of things. And frankly, I don't even think land use should be in a community development department. I think it should remain its own department. I don't like these structures of arbitrarily deciding that we think MPO should go here or there. I think they should work it out and figure out where the best location is.
Okay, well, I think there's gonna be plenty of time for those types of discussions as we consider the ordinance for reorg. So do you want to, Councilwoman Romero Worth, do you want to remove your recommendation regarding the MPO? Or, I mean, you don't have to, and we can vote on it. It's your call.
yeah, I mean, having served on the MPO, I think Councilor Rivera is correct. I was chair of that organization for not almost a year until COVID hit, or some elections came, or there was some change. And it does deal with transportation and roadways and traffic. And so I don't, and again, I thought it was in Public Works. So I was surprised to see it in planning and land use. And I'm happy to, hear from staff about that. I just don't know how. So can we do a separate motion that we, or how do we, or can we give direction that we'd like to know why
Well,
it is?
I think let's approve the budget and let's just give direction to have more discussion on it.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay,
Mr.
so we have a motion.
Councilor Romero Worth, if I could just interject, I think I agree with Councilor Villarreal, and if we could have some time as staff to discuss some of the pros and cons of that realignment, and maybe make a presentation back to the Finance Committee at a later date, and maybe talk about it more moving forward as we start to see how some of these other changes that are being proposed may or may not affect how we do business. I think that would be, if I could ask for or throw out a proposed path forward, that would be what I would recommend.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth, do you want to make a motion?
So I'll move to approve the land, or what are we approving? We're approving the Community Development Department budget, right?
No, the Planning and Land Use Department budget. We don't have a Community Development Department yet.
Okay, well, so, but then.
I missed Economic Development. We need to go back and make a motion on that. I just thought that.
Confused. That's why I'm confused. All right, so I'd make a motion to approve the Planning and Land Use Department
Budget. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, can I have a motion regarding the Economic Development Department budget?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so now we're on to affordable housing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The affordable housing budget before you shows actually an increase, which is good news for helping support our community through the effects of the pandemic moving forward. I did want to clarify a couple of items in the budget. Again, personnel, nobody's being, no pay cuts, no layoffs. We have an empty position that is partially funded 20% from the general fund, but mostly from our community development block grant. And the primary role of that position is to administer the block grant. We are not filling that position right now. I am not clear, and maybe Andy is listening and he can help us understand why the budget shows a dollar change in the positive for the salaries, wages, and benefits on the general fund, because I don't really know why that's there, but I'm sure there's a good explanation for that. I did want to just comment on the fact that we're not filling the position, because as much as I would love to fill it and not also be doing the job, it's a really, really tough time to try to train somebody with all of us in scattered locations. And my staff has been amazing, and everyone has carved up pieces of the administration that they're really capable of doing. And so we are going to move forward with this model for now, because it would actually cause more disruption to try to train a new person. So that's where we are with that one position. I think the reductions we made in the general fund were for all of the discretionary spending, including travel and all that kind of stuff. So that's where you see the negative $15,000. In the budget book, I will request that finance staff amend some of the narrative in the budget book, which talks about the contractual services under community development increasing by 308,901 for rental subsidy payments and other financial services funded by CDBG grants. So that's not accurate. There are 3 ways that the city of Santa Fe supports affordable housing. Through our general fund, we have contracts with homebuyer training and services and homeowner support services agencies, HomeWise and the Housing Trust. This is the last year of a 4-year RFP. We will RFP for those services again next year. We have cut those contracts back to the bare minimum that is legally required. The other part of our general fund budget is to support the administration of rental assistance. That piece of the budget is still in place. So that's where we will fund the Coalition End Homelessness and the Adelante Family Support Program to provide rental assistance. But the other 2 funds, the Community Development Block Grant Fund, which you're all familiar with to some extent, and also our local funding source, which is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. In past budget systems, those 2 revenue sources had their own separate numbers in the budget, so it was very easy to track them in separate ways. Under Munis, they have the same Munis org code, so that's why it becomes a little confusing, and I think that's where the confusion came from. But I would like that narrative to say that these services are funded by CDBG contracts, not grants, and Affordable Housing Trust Fund contracts.
Alex, we'd be happy to make those changes to the
Okay.
budget because you've indicated to correctly reflect what is in your budget.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to point out that increase is not because we got more community development block grant funding, because we actually got less this year, but we reprogrammed some prior year funds. We also mobilized some of our trust funds that we received into the trust fund through some payments from fee in lieu of agreements, and we made the decision, the Community Development Commission recommended that the funds be mobilized immediately during this fiscal year because of all of the challenges going on, and we didn't even know about the pandemic at that time. So that's why that seems like such a big increase. It's actually just availability of funds, because we do not use and this is unlike many of the other revenue funds at the city, we're not looking at a projected revenue flow. We are actually basing the recommended contracts allocations on the cash balance that's in the fund at the time the allocation is made. So that number represents real money. It's not based on a projection. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassett Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was curious about the funds that were initially allocated towards that position from CDBG. Where are they going now? Are we allowed to reallocate them, or is there a cost for not funding that position?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, they will remain in our administrative budget. We're allowed to use 20% of our entitlement grant to cover administrative costs. So until we fill the position, we will use the funds to support the administration of the grant as much as we can. So we will pay for some online training for staff. We have to do a certain amount of mandated advertising, any kind of data or marketing materials for the grant we can use the administrative funds for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yep.
That was all.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just wanting to understand how we are listing the CDBG and Affordable Housing Trust grants, contracts, actually. Where are they placed now? Under general fund?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, they are under the community development as the fund title. So that where it says contractuals and utilities, that's where all of the contracts are contained.
And I don't know if finance can explain this, but community development fund, what else is in that fund? Or what else gets funded through those revenues?
So it's the, Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, it's the Affordable Housing Trust Fund contracts and the Community Development Block Grant Fund contracts.
Okay, so it's not mixed with other funding sources. Okay, just making sure, because these are very specific to the needs we have and they should remain separate. But you said they've changed, they weren't separated out.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, in the old accounting system, that E1, they had their own line items and their own business units. Now they have the same org code under Munis.
So can finance explain why that is the case? Because that sounds like there could be confusion with that funding source. It's very specific to CDBG and housing needs. And I don't want it to be mixed up with any other funds.
Councilor Villarreal, this is Andy. I can speak to that. There is actually one other fund. There are other former E1 funds mixed into this community development fund. For example, it includes some of the other housing areas such as affordable housing loan and affordable housing trust. But those have separate org codes in the system. So in some cases, project ledger codes. So we are able to keep them separate. So it wouldn't be possible for, say, affordable housing loan to spend CDBG money. It could only be spent through the CDBG org. So that's one of the flexibilities that the new financial system offers us that we didn't really have before, that we can segregate budgets without having a cajillion funds like we used to have. Because, as you know, we went from like 700 to 70 funds, which is much, of course, more manageable. And that was one of the reasons we were able to do that, is because we have better ways of keeping these different activities within their respective silos.
And Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, if I could add to that too, and thank you, Andy, for the clarification. I think it doesn't get confusing on the expenditure side, it gets confusing on the revenue side, because it's when you just look at that one big number, you don't know which is which.
Well, that's why that was my point, is that those revenues are very specific to our housing needs, and I don't want them to get mixed up with any other fund that has that same coding. So as long as you all can figure that out, that's important to me. And then I don't know if Andy, you wanted to clarify why the salaries line item was an increase, even though there was a decrease?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, this wasn't one of the departments I reviewed, but where we've seen this kind of change happening in the past is usually because we're kind of changing the way we handle vacancies. In the past, we've had a large vacancy credit that was acted as an offset to salary and benefits budgets. This year, we're doing it a little bit differently in that we're removing the funding for currently vacant positions, which in some cases might mean an increase to overall salaries and benefits in some cases like this example, or in other cases it may lead to a reduction. In most cases it'll be an increase because we had a pretty healthy vacancy credit last year, and I believe for most areas it was 10%, and so in a lot of places this year have less than 10% staff vacancies, so that's why you see a net increase, in addition to, of course, the things like the health plan changes and any salary increases that were put into place last fiscal year before the COVID crisis happened.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, just to clarify, Andy's absolutely correct. That's what's driving the $65,000 increase in the general fund here. And again, just to clarify there, when we're talking about vacancy credits for a small division like affordable housing that has very few staff, when we take a large vacancy credit, it really is a hindrance when the department, if the department has, or if the division has a vacancy, for them to be able to fill that vacancy again, because they're trying to realize that 10, 11, 12% vacancy credit with that vacancy. And in some cases, smaller division like Alex's affordable housing division, sometimes they don't have vacancies at all throughout the year if it's smaller and it's not as high of a churn level. So by removing the vacancy credits, we really are trying to assist, especially these smaller divisions, with being able to be fully staffed.
So are you saying it's somewhat of a placeholder in case things shift with the economy, so that they don't lose that position completely?
Mr. Chair, councilors, this is just really for smaller divisions a better way to budget. That way they are fully funded for the costs of their positions, of their filled positions, of which there are 3 currently. 2.5 are in the general fund, and the other half is in the Fund 240, at $37,000.
Okay, I don't quite understand that, but I will trust that you all understand it. Where does what's the line item that's covering the support for rental assistance? I guess that was for finance, because I'm not quite sure where it's embedded in this.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, it's going to be under the contractuals and utilities.
Through general fund or the community development?
Both, actually.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
All right, Councilwoman Vihel Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want some clarification. So the spreadsheet I see online in front with the shared screen is obviously what I'm following. But the budget book and then the paper one prior that I have, and then I have the one that, the budget book that was emailed yesterday by Mary McCoy are different. The spreadsheets don't match the one on the screen. So for example, salary and wages and such on the documents emailed yesterday and in the budget book that I have had a -1% in salaries, wages, and benefits. And now obviously we've been discussing the 37%. So I just want to know from Ms. McCoy, what happened in between these spreadsheets?
Mr. Chair, Counselor, that's a great question. So the budget book has all of the funds, general fund, community development, and land use wrapped up into one. Whereas the sheets that we are presenting in front of you today dives into more detail. So it separates out the general fund from the community development fund. So you can see the level of complexity and the level of detail with each of the different divisions that we are presenting. So what you have in front of you will, in the budget book that was emailed on Saturday morning is and on Wednesday previous to that is actually all of the tables are a summary by either department or division. So it lumps all of the different funding sources together. But we thought for purposes of our presentations in front of council that it's much better to get into this level of detail where we start to explain the differences, but as Alex did with this budget, or the directors before her can really start to explain the complexity of their different funding sources and how they are used in their departments.
Thank you for that. I do want to say though that the one you emailed yesterday does match the budget book that I have, but it doesn't match what you have on the screen. And they are to the level of detail. But are we going to get, do we have these that you're showing on the screen somewhere?
Mr. Chair, Counselor, I do believe this is what was emailed to you yesterday. I can check with our staff and see if there were any changes, and we'll be happy to clarify what those changes are, if there are any.
Well, for example, I'm on page 39 of what you emailed yesterday, and it doesn't match what's on the screen. So that's really why I'm asking the question.
Mr. Chair and Counselor, is that the budget book that you're referencing or the PowerPoints?
The budget book is what I have that was emailed yesterday, right? And then
correct.
The PowerPoint on the screen doesn't match the budget book. And so I'm interested in the detail that you're showing, and I want to know where can I get that?
Mr. Chair, Counselor, I did email that to everyone and it is posted online as well. I emailed that out yesterday morning, and you know, we will continue to do the same with the other division level detail that we're providing throughout these presentations. And again, the sum total of these divisions rolled up into a department is what is presented in the budget book.
Okay. So I have an emailed budget book emailed July 18th, an email budget book emailed yesterday, and then I have the paper copy that was printed for me before. So
yes, and those tables, Mr. Chairman, Counselor, the tables in the budget book did not change. If you notice the grand total at the bottom of the slide 15, the 291,000, that is the grand total of the page that you're looking at in the budget book. And again, that is the summary level for this particular division. But for these presentations, we decided to be a little bit more transparent and give additional detail, again, to review the level of complexity that, you know, Alex and her team deal with between the general fund and her other funds.
And this was emailed to all of us yesterday.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. Yesterday morning, and it was also posted online.
Right. And I, you know, I pulled up the one that was on July 18th. I pulled up the one yesterday. And I'm still on page 39 of the same one you emailed yesterday, and I don't see this chart. Maybe I'm on the wrong page, but I don't see this chart.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, yes, that is correct. The level of what you are seeing in front of you is a summary level. So if you take a look at the grand total at the bottom of this screen, as well as in the page that you're looking at for affordable housing, those two will match. And so what we've presented to you here is just additional level of detail that again dives into more of the specifics that align with the programs that each one of these divisions manage.
Right, and that this was emailed yesterday at 11:06. This presentation we are seeing in the middle of the screen was emailed to all of us at 11:06 yesterday.
Okay, well, I'll look for that.
Yeah, it says on the subject line, community development, and then final FYI recommended budget. There were 2 attachments to that email, and this was one of them.
Was it emailed by Mary McCoy? Because I do not have an 11:06 email from Mary McCoy.
Yeah, Mary McCoy, and you're on here on the list of recipients, all of us.
Okay, well, and I'm just asking because I just want to follow this. The detail on the screen right now is in this email.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I need to know. I'll dig further. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, on that point.
Yes.
Because we're not getting this little level of detail until, day before each department hearings, is this level of detail going to be replacing what's in the budget book?
No, Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, actually it could. We have either level of detail available. So if the committee prefers this level of detail to be included in the budget book, we're more than happy. I really do think this provides, so much more information. The traditional way of displaying the budget book, what is actually required by ordinance, is the display the format that you see in the budget book. It's by department, by division, by category, and by fund. So that's what you see in those tables. Again, we, in consulting with staff over the last few weeks, we really do feel that this provides just so much more transparency and so much more information about the complexity of the organization, the complexity of the funding structure, as Alex has been able to speak to the complexity of her organization and what she works with on a day-to-day basis. So, and, John Romero reviewed it with us yesterday, Shannon earlier today. So we would be more than happy to provide this level of detail in addition to what is required.
Yeah, I think it would help just because the budget book is high level and it doesn't break it down. I mean, it breaks it down in categories, but then we don't really see the full picture like this. So I actually think these are more helpful in the end to be able to add that to the finalized budget when we get there. But yeah, so it helps to have these. We just don't get them. We get them pretty much like the day before, maybe a few days before, but it is helpful. So thank you.
Yes, and we do apologize for that short notice. We are working as fast as we can to provide this level of detail in the standardized format. So I will be sending out the departments for tomorrow and for Thursday shortly. Staff has wrapped those up today. So really appreciate staff spending the extra time to provide this level of detail in the standardized format for the committee this year.
Okay, are there other questions regarding the affordable housing budget, or are we ready for a motion?
I move to approve the affordable housing.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Roman Abeyta.
Yes. Okay, so we are on to arts and culture.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, counselors, thank you very much for your time. Happy to be here to present our budget for fiscal year 21. Again, our view is we're using the Culture Connect view, focusing and centering on equity, inclusion, and access. And we're going to do that with a very lean and mean team. As you can see, we have reduced our budget 53%. We are fully lodgers tax funded. And as you know, the pandemic has impacted our segment across the board. We have 2 vacant positions that will remain vacant and unfunded. Fortunately, we have a really great team who pitches in, and we will continue to work collaboratively throughout the city with our various partners, arts and culture, and artist collectives. So again, you see in Fund 213, the talk about the salaries and wages, that was where one position was. Our contracts we have decreased, but while still maintaining some funding that will help with doing some art activations, and as well as funding programs such as New Year's Eve also comes out of this as a city historian, as well as some consulting, for example, like the Mayor's Arts Awards or other artist professional development through marketing. In addition, we have some supplies that of course we're going to need. And more importantly, I'm looking, that's like office software for our grant program, insurance, standard across the board for all city departments that was calculated by finance. And then our other operating costs, this is where we took, this was painful. This is where our cultural investment funding program comes out of. And we really tried as a team to hold this as a priority, and I'm sorry, because this really helps our arts and culture organizations who are really doing a great job during this pandemic and changing things up. And so to have to cut this by quite a bit, our funding program was from 800,000, now it's going down to about 320, and I'm hoping with additional increase in the lodgers tax for this fiscal year, we'll be able to supplement that later on. But this, as challenges, also allows us the opportunity for innovation. Just like our other arts and culture partners are doing, we're looking at revamping our grant program to still focus on marketing and promotion, but taking and leveraging this opportunity of the online digital virtual format. So we, again, that is our priority for Fund 213, and we will work with our arts and culture partners to ensure that we all work together and look at different ways, breaking out of our silos even more so, and working collaboratively. Also during this time, it's really important for our youth who've been impacted. So you'll see in Fund 252 for arts and culture grants, I didn't take anything out of that because that is a priority for our youth. Some of that is for the partners in education, and some of the other funding will be to work with youth in arts and culture making, but we're also providing the technical skill set for transition and strategies to create other pathways. We know that 1 in 10 creative jobs, or 1 in 10 of the jobs are in the creative field. And so this is our opportunity in this moment in time to really look at those, how to maximize those digital platforms and build those skills that already are happening in the schools with that and other art collectives. Fund 520 is our community art gallery. This is the opportunity that we have to provide artists with additional professional development. Especially in this time, we've seen many of our artists lose a bulk of their income. So it's really, how do we help them diversify their streams and how to work together. So we're having some of that in our contracts. We also know with the COVID safe practices that there will be some need to do some remodeling within our gallery in order to have 2 workstations again. Currently we had, our gallery manager position will remain vacant. Our project specialist usually sits in there, but I cannot have one person sit in the gallery alone. So we're going to do a little bit of remodel so that we can manage that once we do reopen, and we look forward to when we're able to do that. But in the meantime, we have transitioned to a digital platform. So there's some cost on that for photography and some digital ebooks and other things that we are still looking to promote our exhibitions, as well as help our artists with gallery sales and marketing. So that is our budget in a nutshell. And again, we are hopeful that with lodger's tax and with us flattening the curve as a community, that we will have an increase, some more funds in lodger's tax that we can supplement our budget hopefully by mid-year. And I'm available for any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Pauline, for being able to show how you feel about the impact with our budget. I mean, it doesn't just impact our staff, but it impacts the community. And, you know, it's like basic services are one thing, but also just cultural enrichment and connection to culture is really kind of life-saving in my opinion. So thank you for your work. Just had a couple questions about, you were talking about the cultural investment funding, and that was solely funded through lodger's tax, or was there another piece of that that I missed?
No, we're fully lodger's tax. So the grant, the cultural investment program, the grant program is fully lodger's tax funded.
So a portion, you said there was still a portion of that 320,000. Did I get that number right?
That's what the program is. And then the other component of that, the other expenses for that line item would be services to other departments, which is, I think all departments have to do. And then we also have a small amount for professional associations like the American for the Arts. We have membership dues from that, and also Grant Makers in America. So it's important for us to keep those.
Right, okay. So are you saying then no grants other than the small ones? You're talking about the youth related and the, for lack of a better term, art entrepreneurs, but those are small grants, but there's no grants that will be going out this year for a regular grant cycle? Did I get that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, no, that's not correct. We will have the grant program. It'll be revamped. So our current grant program that we have been doing has been 6 grant categories with a grand total amount for distribution of over 800,000. That's no longer feasible. So we are looking at revising and revamping the grant program in order to reflect the needs, and still with the focus of marketing and promotion, which is the mandate of the use of lodger's tax. But now we have the opportunity to look at how arts organizations and how consumers and patrons are accessing the digital format. So that could be more organizations having artists do segments that then go on a virtual platform that can still be attraction for tourism, but tourism from your seat, from your home. Again, we're still looking at the drive market and when we are up and running again. But that program there will be a grant program. It's just going to look very different, and it has to look different.
Okay, sorry, you said that, but I was still thinking about numbers on 2 screens, so I apologize for that. And then remind me what the 2 vacancies were that are not going to be filled.
Was our art services coordinator, which would basically help facilitate and run the grants program, as well as transition in. Our whole team is cross-training, so it would have been a little bit of public art as well. And then the other position in 520, the community arts, would be the gallery manager.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? This is one of those tough areas, and the area that is hit the hardest in regards to this COVID-19. But I would expect, Mary, that as things open up and if we see an increase in lodger's tax as time goes on, we will rebuild this budget, right?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. That's why we have committed to bringing regular updates to the council on our cash receipts as they are coming in. And additionally, we have committed, if we do have funding that is greater than our revenue estimates, which our budgets are based on, to bring forward budget adjustments.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve the arts and culture budget.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Segni Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez, Counselor
Yes.
Jamie okay, thank you. And Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are on to recreation. Mr. Munoz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Before I begin, I just want to pause here for a moment and just really thank, my peers for, getting through this budget, and Mary's staff for supporting us throughout this process as well. Support the council, and most especially wanted to recognize my team because they've been very, very resilient through this, especially on the recreation side. Anxious to get back in the rec centers. They've been maintaining the rec centers, treating the pools every day. And while they were not doing that, most of their time was spent helping out parks, picking up litter, picking up weeds, working a lot more, working weed eaters, and doing all that work, getting just embedded, and just a great teamwork between the parks team, who are going to miss them once they head back. Happy to report that we opened up safely the Genoveva Chavez Center yesterday. We had almost 200 participants go through, and it was like either Christmas and or Hanukkah all at once, as people were coming in, very, very happy to be in, enjoying the pool and enjoying the fitness center. So I can go ahead and jump, for time's sake, jump through to the spreadsheet, if that pleases the committee.
Yeah, that would be great. We can start with the fitness centers.
And so the first variation, first, if we could go back, okay, is the salary and wages. Again, these are to actuals, and we work with the HR team to get our position staffed. So pretty much the variance there is actuals. As I mentioned yesterday, we have been the best that we have been as far as staff, and you can see that in the trend, especially in the aquatics section. On the variance for contractual and utilities, the big pieces there that you will see involve NMED, pool inspections, Red Cross, security monitoring, fitness store repairs, and items like that. So those were adjusted. We have enough funds to properly inspect pools and do the trainings that we still have left in this fiscal year. The equipment at the small sites, which is Salvador Perez, Fort Marcy, and BC Pool, in pretty good condition. And so we adjusted some of the repair, but did not take all of it out. So that should get us through. One of the themes that you'll see throughout the budget here is our budget here is we focused in on contractual services to save jobs. We also focused in on the fact that due to the governor's orders, we would be either closed down or have less operational hours or less operational facilities. And so that was kind of that's the theme that you'll see throughout this budget presentation. On other operating costs, there are some small adjustments, but the big one, and I'll throw this question over to Andy or to Bradley, because the biggest variance there was services to other cities. That was for $186,049, and that was the variance there. But some of the adjustments that we did make internally as a department or as a division was on training, travel, registration. So again, travel is restricted. And so we pulled back on some of those funds, but Andy, can you go over and am I reading that correctly, that that's the biggest variance of $186,000?
John, I'm afraid you caught me at a little disadvantage on that because I didn't do this budget. I'm like,
Mr.
So
Chair, we are
that's
pulling
what
up
it
the
is.
detail now to be able to support John's observation. So if you can just give me a second.
And I'm sorry, Andy, maybe you could just explain it in general, but that's what I am seeing. As far as an adjustment.
Mr. Chair, councilors, what I would ask Andy to explain as we go through these budgets in the other operating category, as John correctly stated, we do have services to other departments, and those, as our budgets have been reduced, the services to other departments have also, in likely the majority of the cases, also been reduced. So I'd ask Andy to give the committee a highlight again of what services to other departments consist of while we pull up the detailed numbers.
Mary,
yeah.
while Andy's bringing up the detail, I have that up right now. So in the other operating costs, typically you have travel, training, fees and taxes. So if we pay, any of the departments pay a fee or a tax, it would be there. Advertising, promotion, rentals, grant operating costs. And in this case, this is internal service charges, which is services to other city departments, which covers basically finance, HR, city attorney. And then lastly is inventory exempt. And inventory exempt is really small tools, furniture, fixtures, inventory exempt. Inventory, like the parts department, any of the, anybody who's fixing vehicles have spare auto parts somewhere, and that would be there. Modeling and replacement and data processing.
Thank you, Brad. And councilors, John Munoz is correct. The largest decrease in that category, and Brad just provided an explanation of what's in that category, is 186,000 to services of other departments. And again, Andy, if you can just explain generally to the committee what's included in services to other departments.
Yes, well, one slight correction to what Brad said, because this actually came up yesterday too. The general fund service charges, where we charge them, and we don't charge them here, include finance, HR, payroll, things of that nature. But a few years ago, we stopped charging the city attorney's office out to departments. But those are only charged to limited places, like the biggest go to the utilities, because it doesn't make sense to have general fund paying for general fund services. So those are not located here. In this case, what you're looking at in the services of other city departments in the case of recreation is just IT and fleet costs. And those are apportioned out based on, special software a division may have, in addition to how many user accounts they have, how many cars they have, what types of cars they have, things of that nature.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much for confirming that. So as we move along for rec programming, the contractual utilities, the $11,000 adjustment, that is outdoor recreation, primarily the triathlon, as again, going back to the governor's orders with the 5-to-1 ratio or organized sports, we eliminated that fund as well. Moving on to special rec leagues, contractual and utilities as well. Again, here's where we house some officials, monitors, umpires, and things like that. Again, given that the governor's health order prohibits organized sports, we have reduced that fund quite a bit. If we move on over to the next page, unless there is any, let me pause there if there are any other questions.
Yeah, thanks, John. Let's pause there. So it sounds like a lot of the reductions that you're making are a result of the governor's orders and the fact that we can't provide a lot of these services that we used to be able to. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair, committee members. The team still, we still meet and attempt to be creative. We'll see hopefully in the future as the budget develops more, and as you mentioned, GRTs come in with different numbers. Maybe there's different things that we can look at as we flatten out the curve or box in the virus. We might be able to do other events. In the meantime, we do things like keeping in touch, providing some video content, and again, we have recently opened up the Genoveva Chavez Center. But that's correct.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just trying to understand, based on what you just said, Mr. Munoz, that we understand the activities are changing, youth programs are no longer happening, the recreational leagues, etc., which is unfortunate. I guess what I'm trying to understand based on the budget is how the levels of service will change in the fitness centers, given the things that we are able to continue with limited capacity.
Right. Thank you for the question, Councilor Villarreal. Mr. Chair, committee members. So one of the things that we will have to keep an eye on as an example, if you jump to the next page, as far as service levels, and you look at the contractual and utilities, another change that was pretty significant there was we were planning on leasing equipment. The equipment at Genoveva is aged, it's older, and we do receive feedback on that. We have a contract with the Fitness Superstore to repair equipment that we have purchased in the past. And sometimes that takes time. I mean, depending on who the fitness store is servicing and the travel between here and Albuquerque, and just the complexity of the repair, it may take time to fix. Our proposal or our plan was to lease equipment, and then which would make it a faster transition. That if a leased piece of equipment were to break down, then it would be replaced fairly quickly. So we might see some slowdown as far as repairs, and so that would be some of the issues. We want to continue with some of the maintenance work as far as remediation. As you might have seen some stories in the papers last couple of years, and we've been trying to tackle our issues with pigeon guano and things like that. But yeah, I think for now there's still some funding. It's not robust in the event that there are some the numbers look better for COVID, and the governor does lift some of the restrictions where we may be able to assist in maybe smaller camps, and other things like that. Other reduction services, for example, and those are related also to the pandemic, are no classes, no yoga, no fitness classes, and things like that. Same thing for swimming lessons and big swimming camps.
So the activities that are allowed, including swimming, when is that going to shift for us? And will it be able to shift based on this budget?
So as far as this budget, I think, we have enough headcount to staff the Genoveva Chavez properly with the hours that we have now. We have the ability to expand slightly, maybe adding another day. And we have enough staff to open one more facility, either BC Pool or Fort Marcy. Currently, Salvador Pettis is still under construction. So with that, with the budget we currently have and our head counts, we could service 2 facilities. In the future, if we need to come back and as the manager has mentioned and Director McCoy and the chairman, this is a process. So, in 3-6 months, maybe the picture changes and we're able to open another facility. And at that time, I would come back and ask for more headcount to staff fit techs and aquatics team members.
Okay, so the current budget for the fitness centers, that reduction with staff, in addition to requirements of like what we have to do to adjust to sanitation, disinfecting equipment, etc. That's how you got to the conclusion that either BC's, the Bicentennial Pool or Fort Marcy, either or would be able to be open, but not both, correct?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Berrial, thank you for that question. That is correct. So ensuring that we have the proper ratio of aquatics members, ensuring that we have enough team members to do sanitation and enough members to do intake and fill out forms for contact tracing. That's correct. That's the staffing that we have, either to keep Genoveva Chavez open and or to open one more facility.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had similar questions about staff. So, John, do we have any staff, recreation staff at the moment that are currently still working in other departments right now, or has everybody been brought back to rec?
So since early March or so, or late March or early April, all recreational team members except for the ICE team have been at either parks or the MRC. And so with opening up Genoveva Chavez, a cohort of recreational team members were taken to Genoveva Chavez to open it up. There's still members that are still out with parks and the MRC up until we open up either BC or Fort Marcy.
At that point, if we were to open up another one of these rec centers, then we could move those individuals back into rec.
That's correct. That's right, Councilor.
If we don't, for some reason or another, or if our numbers keep going up and our rec centers, we have to pull back on opening rec, or they get shut back down again. Do we have a plan for our staff, what our recreation staff can be doing, either by being lent out to other departments or just thinking about other ways that we can still be providing recreational activities virtually for our community members? I'm just curious, kind of how we're thinking about this. And of course, I know that there are 1,000 different scenarios that we don't know which is going to occur. So I would just like to hear a little bit more about, I feel that this is a department where our current positions and our current staff needs are going to be fluctuating. And I want to make sure that we are looking at other opportunities for our staff as those fluctuations occur.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, thank you for your question. Yes, we've been meeting extensively with the Parks team and with the MRC team, and we do have a plan B. So if COVID numbers go in the wrong direction, then the recreational team members would go back and go back to their assignments and help out with Parks and the MRC. There is a small group of pool folks that would need to stay and treat the pools daily because of their age with chemicalization and brushing. But for the most part, recreational team members would go back and would be happy to assist the Parks and MRC team.
And then our potential reorg, which of course breaks apart Parks and Recreation and MRC, that should not impact this ability to have that collaborative nature still. Because I feel that that's important. You know, if we do move forward with this reorganization, Parks and Rec, you know, there's a reason that they're often put together. So I've just, in terms of the reorg, I'd like to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on how that cohesion would still be able to happen, how that collaboration would still continue, even going past our COVID world.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett,
John, I think your computer froze or your internet connection.
Councilor Abate, I'll let him in. I don't see him on the list anymore as panelists. So I'll wait for him to come back as an attendee and then promote him.
okay. Am I back?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Anyway, thank you for that question. I don't know where I left off. It's a great team. You know, the rec folks, whether they were fit techs or coordinators or lifeguards, they picked up a weed eater. They put on gloves, put on their safety gear, their glasses, picked up garbage, picked up trash, and worked side by side. You know, Parks members, the recreation crews. Wow, you guys work really hard, and the Parks team members would be very complimentary of the rec team and say, you know, you guys, thank you for your help. Thanks, you guys are learning quickly. You're cross trained, and so one thing definitely that COVID did is, you know, not only help us where we were as far as teamwork, it kind of helped us even get closer. And so as far as now, if the reorganization is approved, I just do not see an issue with the recreation team, you know, not wanting to help. They will help wherever they can help. And so will I.
Yeah, I actually was not too concerned about the team members because I know that there was, you know, just such a, you know, wonderful teamwork effort and people going over. It's the coordination efforts. I want to make sure that those are still there. And I'm happy to hear you say as well that you will help wherever you can, because I know that we have a lot of uncertainty coming forward. I mentioned this yesterday. The Parks and Rec reorg is something I have a lot of questions about in terms of where we're placing things. I think that Public Works made a pretty good argument for where there is some overlap between Parks maintenance and Public Works. I do think a lot about, though, in terms of recreation, for me, it's not fitting here. It's kind of one of these things is not like the other. I think that rec goes into health and safety, in my opinion. I also, the other piece I start to think about is thinking about our park spaces, not just as infrastructure, but the recreation that takes place on parks. So I know that we'll have a lot more opportunities to talk about the reorg, but this is one that I feel needs a lot more conversation moving forward. So I'm not sure what that does in terms of approving the budget. Mary, maybe you'd be the one to speak to that, or Chair Beta in terms of approving the budget today, and then how these buckets move around and whether or not that impacts the bucket if we're looking at this from another perspective in terms of the reorganization.
Councilwoman Casa Sanchez, we're approving numbers. We can approve the numbers. So we should approve the budget. But it sounds like there's probably going to be the need for at least one, maybe two more hearings regarding the reorg itself before it is heard by the council on, I think it was introduced for August 26th. So I would assume there's going to be some more discussion regarding the reorg itself. Here, I don't see there's a problem with approving the numbers that are submitted in the budget.
Okay, I didn't see any hiccups either in terms of the numbers, but wanted to check. So thank you for that clarification. Those were all my questions / comments. So I will yield the video.
Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Munoz. Why don't you give us an idea of how this budget, how the public will feel this budget? What are the things that, and you know, we know that we're doing everything we can, you're doing everything you can, and the entire team is doing everything they can to try to stay where we are now instead of going backwards. We know that we can't advance with this budget, but tell us the pain points in this budget that you think the public might feel.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, thank you for that question. So I would say that from a community perspective, our residents would miss or are missing the opening of Fort Marcy facility. They are missing BC Pool. It's a beautiful area. It's outside, and we have very dedicated swimmers that are there religiously at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, and who would like to swim, like we would all like to return to normalcy. So I think that the feeling is not just for physical well-being, but also mental well-being, people wanting to come back to the facilities. One of the things that we were able to do also by looking at contracts, not only save jobs, but also look at the ice rink. So that facility is not going to be permanently closed now because of the governor's orders, but there's potential to look at that. I've been meeting with different constituencies, different groups who are very reasonable and say, well, John, we need different hours and maybe it should be managed differently, or we need different hours and we should be promoting the hockey or the ice rink better than what we're doing. So this is all really good feedback, and it's really caused us to have good discussions with residents and what they need. But I think that Chair and Councilor Lindell, I think people are longing to just return back to normalcy. And as we work through this budget and hopefully look at it, 3 months, 6 months down the road, and there's room to gain a little bit more, maybe we could, and COVID has, the COVID numbers have improved. There's a possibility that we could also quickly pivot to offer more services that our residents have grown accustomed to and really enjoy.
Well, I really appreciate that, Mr. Munoz, and I am appreciative to you also. I know you've put a tremendous amount of work in on this. Some areas are the public's much more engaged with, and sometimes the dialogue isn't easy or pleasant. And I appreciate very, very much how you've answered and participated in that dialogue. And I also note in this budget that you personally are giving up salary. And I would just like you to know that it doesn't go unnoticed, and you've been a terrific team member. So I think addressing these things and acknowledging where we are and what we can provide and what we can't provide with this level of funding allows people to know, and that, you know, once you're past about 12 years old, we don't like surprises. So I very much appreciate how you've approached this, and thank you for answering that question for me.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, John, for all the work you've done in these very challenging times with your team and with these facilities, and the planning to be prepared for whatever it is, you know, we can or can't do. I have to ask you directly, because of the volume of email that we've received, and you've touched on it, but I just want to, I guess, turn the volume up on it, is what is the status of the ice rink under the governor's orders and this budget?
So on the ice rink, Mr. Chair, and Councilor Romero Ward, thank you for the question. So roughly it costs about $523,000 to run the ice rink, and salaries and operations. But you know, and again, we worked through the budget, and we were able to keep that in play. The governor's orders specifically are that it's a indoor recreational facility. So it is a facility that is enclosed inside another building. Also, as with hockey, it is an organized sport. It is a contact sport. So as an example, we did not open racquetballs, indoor tennis, or indoor pickleball because it's an organized sport, and that's under the governor's orders not to open it. So the rink is not operational right now. We will continue to maintenance it and look after it. You know, if there's a phase 2 from the governor's office, I've been in contact with the governor's office, that may include the ice rink. It may not, or it might include portions of it, like maybe figure skating or individual play. So we will definitely keep an eye on that. But for now, the ice rink is closed due to the governor's health order.
But there's nothing in the budget that we approved that preclude it from opening should the governor's orders change.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, that is correct. So should the governor lift that or lift that in partially, then we would be able to open the ice rink.
Okay, and long term, you mentioned meeting with key constituencies. As you meet with them, are you talking about long term, what has to happen to, I don't know, support the ice rink operations?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, that is correct. So I've been meeting with different constituencies. You know, there's various ideas, good ideas out there, great observations as far as, you know, things that we could do more efficiently, better, and to be even more inclusive of bringing more skaters safely into the rink and bring in some more revenue that would help us with our financials. But yes, these are short-term and long-term items that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Vihel Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had similar questions about the ice rink and the volume of email that we're getting. I think if my memory serves me correctly, we just put in over $1 million in an upgrade to our, I think it was equipment of some sort or maintenance. And I don't think it's something we want to forego. So I'm glad that right now, John, that the ice rink isn't on the chopping block. It's also been brought to my attention. Well, first, let me ask you just to dispel the rumor that the ice rink is going to turn into a soccer playground. I need to hear.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel Coppler, it's not turning into a soccer field.
Okay, so I hope everybody who's written us and calling us hears this, but I think it's important because I don't know where that got started, but it has been an enormous issue. So I'm happy, and I'm definitely an advocate of opening the ice rink as soon as practically possible, both with funds and with the governor's orders. So I'm very encouraged by what I hear today, and I hope that it doesn't change what I'm hearing today. It's a tremendous opportunity for our young children, old children, for anyone actually who uses it. And you know, obviously the Genevieve Chavez Center is in Councilor Cassett's district. I think people generally attend facilities close by to them. And so our constituents, I think, are more vocal, maybe not, but I know a lot of other city district constituents use it, but we hear a lot of the issues and certainly the concerns about what's going on at the center. And then of course you hear them from me. So thank you for addressing them. I want to ask you about lifeguards. I know that didn't we have to terminate several lifeguards because they were temporaries? And what is your assessment about how we're stacked up now with staffing on lifeguards, because they're very difficult to recruit?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel Coppler, you are correct. So in the HR exercise that we held previously, we let go or laid off some of our lifeguards. So in the process of laying those off and just with attrition and furloughs, we have lost roughly 8 lifeguards and stand to lose another few. We have enough for Genevieve Chavez with 19 members of the aquatic team there and 11 to open either BC or Fort Marcy. And so we have that aquatic base or bench that we can pull from. So throughout the years, we've had issues, and you know, we've all lived this of recruiting lifeguards. It's been very difficult. So my aquatics team, under the leadership of Matt Cottle and Liz Roybal and myself and Abby and Denise and others, we started up an internal recruitment campaign, and we were staffed. Again, to lose that many lifeguards, we were staffed very healthily. I was happy to say that last season, there were no closures due to lifeguard shortages. There were 2 mechanical issues and 1 human error where we closed for a little bit. And so as we move on and look at in the future opening up another site once Salvador Pettis is finished with construction, we will have to aggressively again recruit, have the budget, have the positions, and recruit for lifeguards so that we're able to staff that additional site.
I know that some lifeguards were out at the golf course. Now that we opened Genevieve, did we get enough lifeguards back from the other locations where they were working, or do we still have lifeguards elsewhere?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel-Coppler, we do have lifeguards and other recreational team members still out at parks or at the MRC. Some of those include lifeguards. There's enough coverage at the Genevieve Chavez right now. We're open Monday through Saturday. As we open up, as we hopefully numbers show that and we work out our processes at Genevieve, then we will be able to pull the lifeguards from the MRC and parks and start them up at another site.
And will you have enough when we open Bicentennial?
If we have enough, Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel-Coppler, we have enough to open up either Bicentennial or Fort Marcy. At this point, we do not have enough to open up 3 more. If Bicentennial, Fort Marcy, and Salvador Pettis came online, we would not have enough at this time.
Okay, well, I would just caution that they're, as you know, they're very difficult people to recruit. Most of the pools in Santa Fe are open, even Albuquerque, and they pay more. So plus you have to get the certification, and a lot of young kids don't know how to swim. So I would just caution you to try to keep your eye on that, because when you need them, and you kind of have to start way before you need them in terms of recruitment. My last question is about the Genevieve Chavez Facilities Director. That position has been vacant. It's our largest facility. In fact, I think it's one of the grandest facilities in New Mexico. It has been without a facilities director for 3 years, maybe more now. It's the most troublesome facility because of its maintenance requirements, and it has a history of very bad maintenance issues. And it is beyond me why this largest facility, and I'm very concerned because it's in my district, has gone without a facilities director for 3 years. 2 budgets ago, the vacancy was moved over to the mayor's office. Then the next budget, you got it back. I want to know, do you still have that position, or is it being removed? And when are you going to fill it? And what does this budget have in terms of consequences about that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel-Coppler, thank you for the question. Yes, as I understand it, we still have the position in my budget. Unfortunately, the last go round, we were working through HR for approvals on the salary, and as we were working through that, and COVID hit, my candidate selected a job elsewhere. So, but we are gonna repost, and I know we have talent out there, and we will fill that position shortly. We're gonna repost and do the justification form and get that position filled. It's important. I totally agree with you. It is a key role. The Genevieve Chavez is 177,000 square feet. It's like its own little city, and that facilities director is like its mayor, and we need a mayor.
I'm sorry, but we need a facilities director and a very experienced one. And I can't believe I'm bringing this up again, because I have brought it up since being on the council. Every single budget season, I've brought it up in normal city council presentations about, the facilities and recreation. And there's something about this center that, seems to be a little cash reserve with regard to this particular position. And it's not okay. This is, again, I can't stress enough, this is the largest facility we have. I think I've heard it's the largest in New Mexico, and it's it's a very needy facility, and for it to go without a facilities director, I can't imagine the workload being placed upon the other people all this time with I don't think increases in pay to accomplish what this facility needs. And you know, if anything, I think at least someone should have been temporarily promoted to that position temporarily, because it requires an experienced person. Not just anybody can run that facility. And in the meantime, I think somebody should get something for caring about the facility, because somebody's caring for it, but probably not the full-time job that it needs. And I've been in there. I mean, it's not perfect, and it could be more perfect because it lacks oversight. So I would appreciate it. I don't want to be here in 6 months or a year asking again about this position. I appreciate you hearing me out once again on this, and I'm not going to forget. So, you know, I think we need to get started, but it looks from your budget that maybe they took the money anyway. Am I correct? Or that money's been gone for a long time.
Yeah, those are, Mr. Chair, Councilor Villa-Coppler, those numbers are to actuals, but as I understood it and the way I read it is we still have that position, and I will do the justification form and post for that. And also take your advice of if that fulfillment is going to take a while, then we should upgrade somebody to that position. That's good direction. Thank you.
It's not fair to impose those duties without some kind of compensation. 3 years is a very long time. And don't forget, I think you need to publish in the recreation journals. I think that's important. So thank you for hearing me out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, John, for the update in regards to the ice rink. I know, as my colleagues have said, we've all been reached out numerous times by constituents regarding their concerns about the ice rink, and I'm glad to hear that it is here with us for the foreseeable future. My question about the ice rink is, you said it costs $523,000 to operate per year, roughly. Does that take into account the revenues it generates? Is that number offset by any means, or is it 523 takes to operate and it brings in X amounts? So are you able to clarify on that?
Sure. So that's total cost, that's expense. The revenues roughly, and Brad can keep me honest, is about $164,000. I'll have to double check that number, but that's the last number that I saw. And so we work at a loss. And again, I don't know how that rumor got out there other than, probably somebody that was in the room, but, which is fine. I think that our purpose, the team's purpose really is to look and see how we can be as efficient as possible. And that's working with each other to generate ideas, to generate ways to be more effective, to be more efficient, and to see if there's ways that we can generate more revenue. And obviously we also look at ideas from constituents, ideas from you all in direction, from you all as well, and from the manager. Yeah, to answer your question specifically, $523,000 is what it costs, is the expense to run the ice rink.
Okay, so it costs us negative necessarily $359,000 because we bring in $164,000. Are there any other recreational facilities or activities that cost us? I mean, does everything operate in the negative, or is there certain things? Does swimming bring in revenue? Is it in the black, or is every service we provide in the red?
Yeah, the purpose and the mission of recreational services are just that, services. So we're not necessarily in the business of making a profit or a net margin. So most of the programs do run with the subsidy or in the red, as you would say. We were looking when we were discussing different sections throughout, we talked about golf, we talked about aquatics, about leagues, and so we were looking at which ones could we make more efficient, and what can we do. So that's what we're going to continue to do. This budget is a process. We're going to continue to see where we can optimize and become more efficient, so that we are at least closer to just being more efficient. I think that's really what we want to look at. It's just how can we become more efficient and provide a good quality service for our patrons, our residents.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. I really appreciate all the feedback and clarification. That's
Thank
all
you.
I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth, and then I think we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I don't want to belabor this, but it does concern me, and I guess I'd like us to think about our philosophy with regard to our recreation facilities. I mean, is it our philosophy that all of these things stand on their own? That, the pool stands separate from the ice rink, stands separate from the workout room? And I mean, or aren't rec centers like rec centers, right? And we should be looking at them as a whole enterprise that provide lots of different activities. It concerns me a little bit that we, in the emails, we seem to be targeting, I don't know, one activity. And, to Councilor Villarreal's, I don't like the idea that we're pitting one recreation group against another, pit soccer against ice skaters. I just don't think that that's productive. And, I don't know what our philosophy is. I don't like it being isolated. And I think if it's a rec center, it's multi-purposed and it's sort of all in there together. So I maybe that's mostly a comment. And maybe down the road, somebody can help me understand, what our philosophy is and how we got in the confusion that we've been hearing about. So thank you.
Councilor Romero Worth, can you make a motion regarding the budget for recreation?
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Roman Abeyta.
Yes. Okay, we are up to tourism. Do we want to try to tackle tourism? Or do we want to pick it up tomorrow before we get on to the other departments? What does the committee want to do? Councilwoman Lindell, do you have a suggestion?
Chair, I just wanted to let you know that I have an absolute hard stop at 5 o'clock today.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's stop then. And so that we have the entire committee available tomorrow. So with that, then we will pick up tomorrow with tourism and then get back into the items that were scheduled for tomorrow. So thank you to the staff and the committee and the members of the council. We are adjourned.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, just real quick, just to comment, to respond to Councilor Romero Worth. Again, the intent was never to pit groups against each other. We were just looking at ways to report and be efficient and look at numbers to see what's being used the most. So I really don't know how that messaging get out there, but if that message, did come out across that way, I apologize. That was not the intent. The intent was to make best use of taxpayer money.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're adjourned. Good night.